You've likely heard phrases from the Sermon on the Mount countless times throughout your life. Turn the other cheek. Blessed are the meek. Judge not, lest you be judged. But have you ever truly considered how these teachings all fit together as one unified message? Most people encounter these sayings as standalone quotes. Memorable, yes, but disconnected, missing the sweeping, radical vision that Jesus was actually unveiling. In today's video, we'll take a deeper look at how the Beatitudes align with the Lord's Prayer. We'll explore why the Golden Rule appears at precisely the moment it does. And we'll uncover how the entire sermon isn't just a collection of wisdom, but a revolutionary guidebook, a master plan for human flourishing that remains as urgent and transformative now as it was 2,000 years ago. By the time we're done, these familiar verses won't feel the same again. But before we begin, if stories like these speak to your soul, consider clicking that like button and subscribing if you haven't already. Your support helps us keep sharing content like this, and we genuinely appreciate it. Feel free to let us know in the comments where you're watching from or what time it is there. Say hi if you'd like. This is a space to connect, a gathering place for hearts around the world to meet. Now then, let's begin, shall we? The mountain, in the morning. Dawn stretches out across the hills that cradle Galilee, bathing them in soft, gold light. Mist curls upward from still waters that stretch like glass toward faraway shores. This lake has echoed with fishermen's voices for generations. Today, it will carry something entirely different. The sun continues its climb, spreading brightness over stone, over wild grass. Along the slopes, flowers bloom in colors beyond naming. Purple lupins swaying in the breeze, red poppies catching the day's first rays. This is spring in first-century Palestine, a time when the land itself seems young again, renewed. Along the shore, a small group walks slowly. Their sandals crunch over scattered pebbles. Waves lap gently beside them. The man who leads them walks with a quiet, deliberate grace. His followers stay close, drawn to him by something deeper than understanding, something they can't quite name. Stories have already moved through nearby villages. And as it always goes, news travels faster than footsteps on dusty roads. More people join. A merchant closes up his stall early. A mother carries her ailing child. Fishermen step away from their nets, abandoning them on the beach. They've come from Capernaum, from Bethsaida, from towns whose names will echo far beyond their lifespans. Hope draws them, as surely as iron to a magnet, and the crowd swells. Hundreds now, perhaps thousands, gather behind him. They follow this teacher, the one who speaks of God as though he knows him intimately, the one who heals with a simple touch, the one whose stories don't just teach, they stay with you, taking root like seeds in good soil. Jesus turns to face the growing crowd. He needs a place where everyone can see him and hear him. His gaze finds a natural rise in the land, a gentle hill sloping upward from the shore. The acoustics are perfect. It's as if the Creator designed this very space for what's about to unfold. Here, the morning air carries sound with uncanny clarity. Voices ride across the water and return amplified. Even whispers will reach the furthest listener. He begins to climb. The crowd follows him, arranging themselves along the grassy slope like petals scattered by a careful hand. Children settle near the front. Mothers spread their cloaks across the ground. Old men lean against walking sticks, their faces marked by decades of wind and sun. This hill bears no name in the Gospels, and it doesn't need one. Some places become sacred not by title, but by what takes place there. This morning, ordinary earth is preparing to receive extraordinary words. Below, the Sea of Galilee glows blue-green beneath the strengthening light. Fishing boats drift across its surface like tiny toys. The waters that have nourished this people for generations now reflect the faces of those who are about to be fed in an entirely different way. Spring grass softens their seat. The scent of fresh growth fills the air. Everything around them speaks of renewal, of life awakening from its winter sleep. Even the stones seem to listen, holding their silence in reverent anticipation of something greater. The stones beneath their feet seem almost sentient, holding their long and ancient silence in reverent anticipation of something greater than themselves. Jesus carefully chooses his place midway up the hill, just high enough for every eye to see him clearly, yet near enough for every voice to reach the ear. In a world untouched by amplification, Positioning is sacred. Every movement must stretch to the outermost rows. Every word must bear the weight of truth and carry across the quiet expanse to reach souls that are ready to receive. The crowd begins to settle. Voices slip into hushed murmurs, then disappear altogether. Even the children, usually restless and unpredictable, fall still, sensing something important is drawing near. The birds continue their songs, but now they sing more softly, as though the natural world itself steps aside to make space. This is how holy moments often begin, not with loud proclamations or fanfare, but with common people gathered on a nameless hill in the middle of a mild spring morning. The sacred conceals itself in the ordinary, waiting patiently for hearts and eyes trained to recognize it. Jesus scans the gathering. Tax collectors sit beside prostitutes. Pharisees stand next to fishermen. Wealthy merchants share space with the poorest of beggars. On this hillside, the divisions of the world begin to fade. He has walked among them for many long weeks. He has seen what they carry, their burdens, their hopes, and the quiet, hidden weight of despair. He understands the crushing demands of religious law, the unrelenting fatigue of poverty, the bitter humiliation of being occupied by a foreign power. They don't need more rules. They need words that do not bruise, but bind. They need healing, not more heaviness. As the sun climbs higher, it casts golden light across faces tilted upward with expectancy. Some have journeyed for miles, walking for days to reach this moment. Others woke before dawn, stirred from sleep by whispers that the teacher had returned. Every soul here hungers for something deeper than food, something their hearts can't quite name. Time begins to stretch thin. The moment unfurls like honey slipping slowly from a wooden spoon, suspended, sweet, eternal. In this pause between gathering and speaking, the entire hillside seems to hold its breath. The ordinary is about to open into something infinite. Words spoken in this place will echo for centuries. They will shape hearts that haven't yet been born. This is the mountain, and this is the morning. A space crafted by providence, a moment gently infused with eternity. Everything is ready. The stage has been set for what will become the most important sermon in human history. The rabbi sits. In Jesus' world, standing was a signal of urgency, but to sit, that was a sign of solemn authority. When a rabbi sat to speak, it meant the words to come were meant to be carried, pondered, lived. The gesture itself was a message. Prepare your hearts for something that will endure. Jesus lowers himself to the grass. His disciples instinctively move closer, forming a quiet circle around him. The larger crowd reshapes itself as well, arranging like a living amphitheater carved into the land. Even those at the back, too far to see his face, will still be able to hear him. And on this hillside, in this sacred hour, hearing is everything. A hush spreads over the crowd like wind across a calm lake. The last conversations dissolve into silence. Even the smallest children grow still, sensing the invisible weight that rests upon this moment. Before a single word is spoken, his posture declares that what is coming will not be fleeting or casual. It will matter. In Jewish culture, rabbis were deeply honored as the stewards of divine wisdom, the interpreters of sacred law, the vessels that connected heaven to earth. When a rabbi sat, the lesson was intended to penetrate soul and spirit. Students didn't just listen with ears, they opened their whole beings to receive. But this teacher is unlike any they have known. While most quote revered voices of the past, anchoring their claims in ancient authority, this man speaks with a quiet, inward confidence that seeks no validation. His authority does not flow from books or traditions. It rises from within, unmistakable and unexplainable. The morning breeze stills. Even the earth seems to pause. The birds stop singing. The lake's waves soften into rhythmic silence. All of creation leans in to hear. Jesus scans the crowd. He sees them, young and old, rich and poor, those who've studied scripture their whole lives, and those who can barely read. He sees the scribe who burns midnight oil memorizing Torah. He sees the widow counting the last of her coins, unsure if it's enough for bread. He sees the fisherman whose hands are permanently rough with labor. Each one of them bears a story. The woman grieving a husband lost too soon. The man drowning in debts he cannot escape. The child whose father drinks to forget. The priest who still wonders, in the silence of his own prayers, whether God is listening at all. Jesus sees them, every single one. He knows their stories, and he loves them deeply. This is why he sits, not because he is weary, but because he is deliberate. His position isn't casual, it's intentional. It signals that what is about to unfold deserves complete attention. In a world where teachers often wandered as they spoke, standing and pacing with urgency, stillness is a declaration. It calls for sacred focus. The disciples remember the other times he has sat like this, beside wells, inside synagogues, from a boat just offshore. In every case, it was the same invitation: open wide your hearts. What comes next must be planted deep. Specks of dust dance in the golden light. The sun rises higher, casting long, reaching shadows over the slope. Time feels different here, less like a clock ticking forward and more like something wholly expanding. This is no longer time measured in minutes. This is kairos, time measured in depth, in meaning, in sacred presence. There's no scroll in his hands, no notes or script. The words he is about to speak will come not from preparation, but from divine wellsprings. They will flow through him, from the heart of God to the hearts of men and women. Fresh as morning dew, yet old as the stars. The crowd waits. There is something about waiting on a hillside that is easier than waiting in a marketplace. The space invites it, the grass beneath their bodies, the wide sky above them, the water glinting in the distance. This is cathedral space, sacred ground not shaped by tools, but by divine hands. Some have walked for hours to get here. Their feet ache from rocky paths, but now they rest on soft, cool soil. Their worn bodies begin to relax, and the rest they find physically is a reflection of the soul rest they are about to receive. Jesus draws a long breath. The air smells of spring, of earth awakening. Around him, hundreds wait, united in a silence so complete it feels weightless. In that stillness, he hears the deeper hunger. It is not for food. It is for hope, not for spectacle, but for truth, the kind of truth that doesn't just inform but transforms. This is the moment when teaching becomes something more than information, when it becomes eternal, when words, carefully spoken, cross the boundaries of time and space and land in the most permanent corners of the human heart. The rabbi sits, and eternity, silent until now, opens like a flower in full bloom. He opens his mouth. The first words will not be about judgment or command. They will be about blessing, about a kingdom turned upside down, a kingdom where the last are first, where the poor receive all that truly matters. But before that voice cuts through the air, there is this perfect pause, this sacred stillness before the music. The hillside holds its breath, and heaven bends low to listen. The hillside holds its breath. Heaven leans low in silence, listening with reverence. The Sermon on the Mount is about to begin, and then Jesus speaks. Blessed are the poor in spirit. His first words fall into the quiet like stones into glass still water. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They are simple, almost weightless words, but they strike with the force to overturn empires, especially the empires built within the human heart. In the world Jesus addresses, poverty is shameful. The poor are expected to disappear into the background. They live in shadows, apologize for being seen, and take crumbs from tables where they will never be welcomed. But Jesus speaks of a different kind of poverty. Not the absence of coins, but the absence of pride. Not empty pockets, but empty hands stretched upward, waiting in hope. Poor in spirit. What an unusual phrase. It doesn't mean poor in money, though many listening certainly are. And it doesn't refer merely to hard circumstances, though these sun-beaten faces carry years of hardship. Jesus points to something deeper, something invisible, something that cuts across every boundary of wealth and class. Imagine the tax collector who knows exactly who he is. His fingers are stained with compromise, his soul heavy with betrayal. He lingers at the edge of the crowd, not daring to come closer. But Jesus directs his first blessing to men like him. Poor in spirit means stripped of pretense. It means knowing you cannot climb your way into heaven, cannot buy favor, cannot present credentials impressive to God. It is the opposite of pride. It is the enemy of religious arrogance. The Pharisees shift where they sit. These are men who've spent their lives compiling spiritual resumes. They fast religiously, tithe their herb gardens, speak long and eloquent prayers in public squares. They are rich in religious achievement. But Jesus does not honor their fullness. He blesses emptiness. A woman near the front begins to cry, quietly, but with real sorrow. She knows the kind of poverty Jesus means. Her failures feel heavier than sacks of grain. She's tried to be good, tried to obey, tried to earn God's love by doing everything right. And she's exhausted. But Jesus doesn't meet her exhaustion with condemnation. He offers blessing. The word he uses is makarios. In Greek, it means happy, fortunate, to be envied, not pitted, not cursed, blessed, as if spiritual emptiness is the most enviable state of all. It flips the entire world order upside down. In human kingdoms, the powerful rule and the weak submit. But in God's kingdom, those who admit their weakness inherit everything. The crown is given to the one who knows he cannot wear it. And notice the tense. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Not will be, is, present, immediate. The moment someone realizes they are spiritually bankrupt, they are welcomed into the fullness of God's reign. Empty hands are ready to receive infinite riches. Children understand this better than adults. Watch a 5-year-old run to a grandparent. No mask, no performance, just arms wide open and the complete expectation of being caught. That's poverty of spirit. That's the kind of trust that assumes love, not because it's earned, but because it's given. The religious leaders had always taught that blessing follows performance. Obey, sacrifice, work hard enough, and maybe God will smile on you. Jesus dismantles that entire structure with 8 words. Those who think they're furthest from God are often closest. Those most aware of their need are most ready to receive. The addict may understand his poverty more clearly than the well-behaved man. The heart that's broken often sees grace more vividly than the heart that thinks it has everything. A beggar sits at the edge of the crowd. His clothes are worn down to patches over patches. His hands bear the permanent marks of survival. He's never owned anything that mattered, never achieved anything that drew praise. But he listens to these words, and something rises in his chest. A new kind of warmth. Blessed. The word washes over him like oil poured on wounds. Not cursed, not forgotten, not excluded, but blessed. Jesus says the kingdom belongs to him. Not someday, not after he's cleaned up, but right now, today. Poor in spirit also means open to learn. The full cannot receive, but the empty are ready. Pride closes the ears. Humility pries them open. Those who know they need help actually listen for it. This blessing rains down on parched lives. So many here are weary of pretending, weary of the act, weary of masks that slip at the worst moments, weary of contests they were never meant to win. Jesus offers them freedom from performing, from striving. The kingdom of heaven belongs to the ones who have run out of strength. What good news this is! What relief! What strange, sweet joy! The very thing we try to hide, our need, our failure, our spiritual bankruptcy, is the thing that qualifies us for blessing. Morning light strengthens across the hill. The first beatitude lingers like morning mist, slowly settling into hearts that have waited a lifetime to hear such words. The upside-down kingdom has just been proclaimed, and everything they believed about blessing is about to shift. Blessed are those who mourn. Tears don't belong in most kingdoms. They make the powerful uncomfortable. They disturb the surface. They reveal that the world is broken in ways power can't fix. But in Jesus' kingdom, mourning is honored. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The words feel strange in a culture obsessed with constant happiness, a world that treats sorrow like a flaw to be corrected quickly. Yet here, on this hillside, grief becomes a sacred path. A mother hears the words and knows them to be true. Her child died last winter, taken too soon despite her every desperate prayer. The other women in her village told her to accept it, to stop crying, to trust that it was God's will. But her arms still ache for the child they can no longer hold. Jesus sees her tears, and he calls them blessed. Not the pain itself. God does not delight in suffering, but the honesty of it, the courage to grieve when everything is broken. Her sorrow honors the love that was lost. Her tears are prayers, too deep for words, too sacred for language. There are many kinds of mourning. Some cry over personal loss. The husband who never came back from war, the harvest wiped out by storms, the friendship shattered by betrayal. These wounds cut deep and scar the soul. Others mourn for a bigger grief. the prophet who sees injustice and cannot stay silent, the priest who watches his community's faith fade into ritual, the teacher who weeps for students who choose darkness over truth. Their tears fall into soil that looks too hard for anything to grow. The comfortable don't understand this blessing. They live behind hedges that filter pain, inside walls where grief is trimmed and hidden. They confuse numbness with peace and distance with wisdom. They don't know why anyone would choose to feel so deeply. But to mourn is to be alive. It means the heart has not closed itself off. It still beats in rhythm with the heart of God. The callous feel nothing. The tender feel everything. And Jesus blesses tenderness. In Hebrew tradition, mourning was never rushed. There were rituals, torn garments, ashes smeared on heads, days spent in silent company. Friends didn't try to explain pain away. They just sat beside it. Grief was allowed to breathe. Healing came slowly, like dawn that doesn't announce itself, but eventually shows you the way. Comfort comes, but not always quickly. Some griefs take seasons. Some comfort arrives as understanding. Not answers, but peace that makes space for what doesn't make sense. Not because God explains, but because love grows larger than logic. Sometimes comfort comes as presence, as companionship. Those who mourn begin to find others who've walked this same valley, who know what this darkness feels like. They don't speak in platitudes. Their presence says something deeper. You are not alone. You will live through this. One day, you will smile again. The deepest and most enduring comfort comes not from words spoken by others, but from God Himself, the Creator who numbers every sparrow that falls, who catches every tear with care, storing them like treasures in bottles. This is the God who does not observe suffering from a distance, but understands it from within, because He chose to step into it fully. He bore it on His shoulders, felt it in His body, carried it in His soul. This is a comfort that exceeds anything human empathy can offer. A widow in the crowd listens to these words, and hope begins to stir in the quiet places of her heart. She has mourned her husband for 3 long years, and by now, the village has grown tired of her sorrow. They expect her to have moved on. But Jesus speaks directly into her ache. He blesses her unending grief. He honors her enduring love. Her tears become sacred offerings. Her sadness is seen not as weakness, but as faithfulness. Those who mourn eventually learn how to comfort. Suffering, over time, tutors the heart in compassion. The one who has walked through the darkness becomes a guide for those still searching for light. In this way, grief transforms into a strange kind of gift, a wound that slowly begins to heal, and in the process, teaches others how to heal too. This blessing expands beyond individual sorrow and reaches into the brokenness of the world itself. Some people mourn not only what they have lost, but what the world has lost. They see hungry children while storehouses overflow with rotting grain. They witness the powerful crush the powerless and then justify it as order or law. Their tears are more than sadness. They are intercession. They cry not just for themselves, but for creation. These mourners become allies in God's restoration. Their grief is not passive resignation, but active resistance. They do not simply endure the world's brokenness. They push against it with tears and truth. They mourn now, so that laughter may rise later. They plant seeds in the soil of their sorrow, believing that joy will grow in its time. Comfort will come, but it will not erase memory or pretend the loss was meaningless. It will not silence grief or demand cheerfulness. It will come like light seeps into darkness, soft, gradual, undeniable. It will weave the pain into a larger story, one in which death does not speak the final word, where love endures longer than loss, where hope survives every heartbreak, and where joy returns not in spite of mourning, but because of it. The hillside seems to cradle this promise like open hands catching rain. Those who mourn are not left to drown in their sorrow. They are held inside it, encircled by divine love that understands completely, and supported by grace that does not tire. Their tears do not disappear into the dust. They soak the ground, preparing it for the growth of eternal comfort. Blessed are the meek. This is not what most would expect. In a world shaped by strength, where power is revered and dominance rewarded, meekness sounds like weakness. But Jesus defines it differently. Meekness is not the absence of strength. It is the deliberate choice to restrain it. It is strength that chooses gentleness. power that chooses to serve rather than dominate, force that chooses to build rather than destroy. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The words drift through the crowd like seeds on a breeze, settling into soil long prepared by suffering. These listeners know what it means to be powerless. They've watched Roman soldiers march through their streets, weapons gleaming like silent threats. They've been drained by tax collectors who enforce Rome's greed. They've been buried under religious laws too heavy to carry, judged by systems they never chose. Power, as they've known it, has always hurt them. But Jesus speaks of another kind of strength, not passivity wrapped in piety, not weakness pretending to be virtue, but a strength that is controlled, surrendered, purposeful, like a master horseman guiding a powerful stallion with nothing more than a breath, like a musician whose fingers create beauty not through force, but through discipline. Moses was called meek, yet he faced Pharaoh and demanded liberation for an entire people. David, too, was meek, yet he stood in a battlefield with nothing but a sling and faced down a giant. Their power didn't come from weapons. It came from trust in a God who fights alongside the righteous. They acted boldly because they knew they were not alone. A farmer in the crowd sees this image clearly. His oxen are strong enough to topple trees, but instead, they lower their heads to the yoke and draw his plow through yielding soil. Their strength is not erased. It is redirected to serve something life-giving. This is the image Jesus offers, power harnessed for holy purpose. The meek are not people without convictions. They are not passive or indecisive. They simply refuse to impose their will by force. They know that hearts cannot be changed by coercion. They plant truth and wait with patience, rather than demanding instant results. Look at Jesus himself. Soon, soldiers will come for him with swords and torches. He could summon legions of angels, but instead, he will stretch out his hands. When his accusers shout for his death, he could silence them with a breath, but instead, he will pray for their forgiveness. This is meekness. To many, it will appear weak or foolish, but it holds a power the world cannot recognize, the power to change hearts, to interrupt violence, to plant peace where nothing else will grow. It inherits the earth not by conquering it, but by restoring it. It's a radical promise. How can the gentle inherit anything in a world that rewards the ruthless? History seems to belong to those who take and crush and claim. The meek are rarely remembered. Their names, if recorded at all, are hidden in footnotes and forgotten corners. But Jesus says, look deeper. The true inheritance is not territory or wealth or titles. Those things pass from hand to hand, lost and gained like chips in a game. The real inheritance is found in the ability to live fully and peacefully, to enjoy what you have, to wake up without fear, to rest without regret. The conqueror lives in paranoia, always watching for the one who will take what he took. The meek sleep soundly. They hold nothing that can be stolen. They carry wealth that multiplies when shared. Who, then, is truly rich? A child runs up the hillside, laughing at her own private joy. She owns the sunshine. She owns the feel of grass beneath her bare feet. She owns the love shining in her mother's eyes. No army can seize those gifts. No law can tax that delight. This is the inheritance of the meek. They receive the world not by force, but by welcome. Every sunrise is a personal blessing. Every flower seems to bloom just for them. Every bird sings in their private sanctuary. The entire world opens to those who approach it with gentle hearts. Meekness also means living with a deep humility, especially about our own limitations. The proud believe they can control everything with enough effort or intelligence, but the meek understand just how little is actually under their command. They know how much in life must be received, not earned. And that awareness opens doors that pride keeps shut. In God's kingdom, the way up is always down. Those who bow are lifted. Those who wait are honored. Those who serve are crowned. The meek inherit, not by striving, but by trusting. They know that all good things come from a Father who gives generously. This blessing turns the world's values inside out. It dares to say that the janitor who smiles and serves faithfully may carry more divine authority than the executive who rules by fear. That the quiet teacher who shapes lives with patience may be greater than the general who takes nations by force. This inheritance begins now. The meek already receive peace of heart, clarity of soul, and joy in the simple things. But the fullness of their reward awaits the day when God's justice floods the world like oceans covering the sea. Until then, they live as stewards of mystery. Their gentleness confronts violence. Their humility questions pride. Their trust in God's justice gives hope to those crushed beneath human injustice. They inherit the earth one act of love at a time, one quiet prayer, one unnoticed kindness. This is the strength of the meek. This is the blessing they carry. The meek are able to inherit because they live with the quiet, radical awareness that everything in life, every breath, every blessing, every piece of peace, is not earned through merit, but received freely from the hand of a deeply generous Father. This blessing disrupts and redefines every worldly assumption about what it means to succeed, what it means to matter. It dares to suggest that the janitor who serves others with a cheerful heart may hold more real spiritual authority than the executive who governs through fear and intimidation. That the teacher who patiently nurtures young minds may, in the long run, inherit more lasting value than the warrior who takes land through conquest. This inheritance the meek receive is not confined to some distant future. It is both present and approaching. They begin to receive it now, in subtle, profound ways, in the stillness of a heart at peace, in the clarity of a soul aligned with truth, in the quiet joy that arises from the beauty of simplicity. But the fullness of that inheritance awaits the great restoration, when God's justice will roll down like waters and cover the earth as deeply as the sea covers its basin. Until that glorious unveiling, the meek live as stewards of mystery, holding space for sacred possibilities. Their gentleness confronts a world addicted to aggression. Their humility undermines the foundations of pride. Their steadfast trust in divine justice becomes a living witness, a flickering light for those crushed under the weight of human injustice. They inherit the world not through conquest, but through compassion. One softened heart at a time, one quiet act of kindness, one persistent, faithful prayer. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The human body remembers hunger. It remembers the gnawing ache of emptiness, the clenching of a stomach like a closed fist. It remembers the scrape of a dry throat and the desperation that makes even the most basic meal feel like a treasure. Hunger and thirst take over. They become the only things you can think about. Jesus blesses those who know this desperation, but not for food or water. He speaks of a different ache, a deeper craving, a soul-level hunger that bread cannot touch and water cannot satisfy. It is the hunger for righteousness. It is the aching longing for the world to be made right. It's the soul's cry for justice to flow like mighty rivers, for mercy to descend like rain. It is the desperate thirst for God's will to be done, not just in distant heavens, but here and now, in this broken world of ours. This hunger is not a gentle yearning. It burns. It wakes you up at midnight, your heart heavy with the memory of a widow denied justice by corrupt judges. It sits like a stone in your chest when you see children with outstretched hands while the wealthy eat in excess. It rises like fire when you witness laws twisted to protect the powerful and crush the powerless. Some people never know this hunger. They live behind gates and walls, buffered from the cries of the world. Injustice to them is just a headline, distant, abstract, inconvenient. Their souls grow bloated with apathy. Their hearts grow hard with self-preservation. Others do feel the hunger, and they try to feed it through action. They join movements, sign petitions, march for causes. These things matter. They plant seeds of hope. But even the most passionate, cannot fully satisfy this ache, because the hunger Jesus blesses is deeper still. It is not merely a longing for reform. It is a yearning for heaven to invade earth, for perfect justice, not temporary relief, for divine mercy, not human compromise, for a love so transformative it cannot help but change everything it touches. A scribe in the crowd understands this hunger all too well. He studied the law his entire life, memorized every line written to protect the weak and ensure fairness. But day after day, he sees those laws bent to serve the rich, wielded like weapons to silence the vulnerable. His righteousness feels like rearranging chairs in a burning house. He needs something more, something beyond human systems. And Jesus offers that something. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. not slightly satisfied, not temporarily relieved, but filled to overflowing. The Greek word used here paints the image of a great banquet, of guests at a wedding feast, satisfied beyond want. This fulfillment comes in waves. It begins with honesty, the brave admission that human righteousness, no matter how earnest, is never enough. It begins when a person can say, "I cannot fix this on my own." This humility makes room for something greater to enter. Next comes the gift of justification, being declared righteous, not because of achievements, but because of what Christ has done and will do. This righteousness is not fragile or fickle. It is unshakable. It satisfies not because it flatters, but because it is rooted in the very character of God. And yet the filling continues. Those who hunger for righteousness begin to live it. Their hunger becomes their heartbeat. Their lives become rivers of justice and streams of mercy. They feed the hungry. They lift up the grieving. They defend those the world tries to forget. This is not virtue generated by effort. It is the natural overflow of a heart so deeply loved by a righteous God that it cannot help but give. Like a spring rising from hidden places, righteousness begins to pour from the depths. This hunger also binds people together. It forges community. Those who carry this longing recognize each other. They find strength in one another. They share the burden and the vision. They become a living witness that righteousness is not only needed, it is possible. A merchant stands in the crowd, looking inward. He's always prided himself on fairness, on not cheating his customers. But now, something deeper stirs. He no longer wants to be merely honest. He wants to be holy. He wants his trade to reflect God's own generosity, his justice, his care. He wants to bless everyone his hands touch. This hunger, like the inheritance of the meek, offers tastes of fulfillment even now. In answered prayers, in moments of truth breaking through corruption, in the quiet peace that comes from living according to God's design. But full satisfaction still awaits the kingdom in its fullness. And in the meantime, the hunger does not disappear. It does sacred work. It protects the soul from indifference. It keeps urgency alive. It keeps the heart tender toward pain, and the conscience alert to compromise. It drives the blessed to their knees in prayer and to their feet in loving action. This hunger is not a curse. It is a divine connection. It is the place where the human heart touches the heart of God. For no one hungers for righteousness more deeply than he does. To hunger with him is to become like him. To thirst for his justice is to join him in restoring all things. And the promise stands, like a mountain at dawn, solid, unshakable, glowing with certainty. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled. Not might be, not could be, will be. The ache is real. The satisfaction is certain. And the kingdom is coming. The promise stands firm like a mountain ridge kissed by morning light, solid, unwavering, unmoved by time or circumstance. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled, not might be, not perhaps, but will be. The certainty of satisfaction is as strong and real as the ache of the longing itself. Blessed are the merciful. Mercy halts the endless spiral of retaliation. It steps into the path of deserved judgment and calmly says, "This far, no farther." It absorbs pain rather than reflecting it back. It replaces harm with healing. In a world where justice often masquerades as revenge, mercy can seem like madness. And yet Jesus proclaims, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy." These words fly in the face of everything our instincts call fair. When someone wounds us, every bone in our body screams for equal response, proportional, justified, measured retribution. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. This is the logic of human law, the symmetry of the courtroom, the calculation of self-protection. But Jesus offers new mathematics, equations built on grace instead of retaliation, generosity instead of scarcity. He points toward a kingdom whose entire economy runs on mercy, where forgiveness proves stronger than vengeance and restoration more lasting than judgment. A woman near the front of the crowd knows this mercy like she knows the lines of her own hands. Once caught in adultery, she had stood before her accusers with shame burning in her chest, expecting stones to fly. According to Moses, the punishment was death. The crowd clutched rocks with justice in their minds and judgment in their fists. But Jesus, kneeling in the dust, wrote something that made them pause. He spoke a word that made them scatter. One by one, they left until only she remained. And mercy stood with her. That day changed everything. The mercy that saved her life became the mercy that shaped her character. When others spoke cruelly about the tax collector's children, she defended them. When children mocked the man with the twisted legs, she guided them away with gentle compassion. Mercy had opened her eyes to see beyond offense, to see the humanity in the offender. She knew now that many who inflict pain do so out of their own wounds, their own histories of hurt. Mercy doesn't ignore wrongdoing. It simply offers a different response. One that creates space for healing instead of punishment, for transformation instead of bitterness. The merciful carry wounds. They've been betrayed by people they trusted, hurt by those they loved deeply, disappointed by those they once helped. Yet somehow, their hearts remain soft. Their hands stay open. They have learned the hard way that becoming hard heals nothing. That closing the heart might prevent further injury, but it also shuts out healing. Mercy requires strength, not the strength to strike back, but the strength to absorb pain without returning it. To choose love in the face of hostility. To bless in the place of insult. A father in the crowd wrestles silently with this teaching. His son had run off, taking the family's savings and throwing it away on reckless living in faraway cities. When the boy returns, filthy, broke, ashamed, justice demands consequences. And yet, something in the father's chest aches not for retribution, but for embrace. He dreams of running to meet his son, not with condemnation, but with arms wide open. The teaching of Jesus both comforts and unsettles. Those who show mercy will be shown mercy from God, from others, from life itself. But the other side of the promise is sobering. Those who withhold mercy may find it elusive when their time of need arrives. This isn't some cosmic vending machine where mercy in equals mercy out. It's not divine bookkeeping. It's deeper. It's a truth woven into the fabric of the universe. We reap what we sow, not as punishment, but as consequence. Those who practice mercy become the kind of people who can actually receive it. Their hearts remain open to grace. Their eyes stay wide enough to recognize it. And in extending mercy, something inside them also heals. Because resentment is a poison that corrodes the vessel that carries it. Bitterness, left unchecked, eats away at the soul like rust. But forgiveness, real, honest mercy, frees both the one offering it and the one receiving it. It breaks the lock on the prison of pain and opens both doors. The merciful begin to see with God's eyes. They recognize that beneath every sharp tongue lies a history. Behind every harsh judgment hides a wound. The proud man may be shielding old rejection. The selfish one may have grown up scraping for every scrap. Mercy begins with understanding. And it doesn't stop at individual relationships. Mercy spills over into systems and structures. The merciful build different kinds of institutions, schools that heal, courts that restore, communities that lift rather than crush. They advocate for justice that repairs, not just justice that punishes. They believe in consequences, yes, but consequences that teach, not torment. True mercy doesn't erase justice, it completes it. Not by destroying, but by mending. Sometimes mercy looks like accountability, the hard kind that helps someone see the weight of their choices and still believes in their capacity to grow. In this way, the merciful become reflections of God. Throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, mercy is one of His most celebrated traits. His mercy endures forever. His compassion fails not. His kindness reaches all His creation. To show mercy is to mirror His heart. A judge in the crowd listens, torn. His job is to uphold the law, to punish crime, to protect the innocent. And yet, deep in his soul, he feels the quiet pull toward mercy, the desire to balance justice with compassion, to find paths that heal instead of paths that simply punish. He wants to reflect God's justice, not just man's code. Jesus' words offer a promise. Mercy is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is not an invitation to tolerate evil, but the power to transform it. It doesn't discard justice. It fulfills it in ways no rulebook ever could. Those who practice mercy join in God's work of redeeming the world. They are promised mercy, not just one day, but in 1,000 little ways, in unexpected forgiveness, in fresh chances, in grace that comes not because they've earned it, but because they dared to offer it first. Their moments of failure will be met with kindness. Their needs will be answered with undeserved love. Blessed are the pure in heart. In Palestine, dust settles on everything. It clings to the sandals of travelers. It coats the fruit in the marketplace. It dulls the shine of children's hair. You cannot walk those roads and stay clean. Yet Jesus dares to speak of purity, not of skin or clothing, but of heart. He speaks of hearts washed clean, of inner vision cleared of everything that distorts and confuses. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The words are simple, but they cut straight through every layer of human longing. Who doesn't want to see God? To know Him, not just as an idea, but as a presence. to experience him, to glimpse the face that crafted the stars. But something always seems to cloud the view. Some fog on the glass, some veil between soul and spirit. In Hebrew thought, the heart is not just emotion. It's the center of your will, your intellect, your character. It's the control room of your being. To be pure in heart is to be whole. To be one thing, not many. To be fully aligned. Most hearts are divided. A piece wants God. Another piece wants comfort. One part craves truth. Another clings to lies. We reach toward light with one hand and hold onto shadow with the other. This inner conflict muddies the waters of our spirit. It's like grime on a window that blurs the light trying to get in. A woman kneels at the village well, drawing water as she has done every morning for 20 years. Today, as she peers into the bucket, she sees more than her reflection. She sees her longing for clarity, for simplicity, for truth untainted. Jesus isn't blessing moral perfection. If he were, no one would qualify. He's blessing singleness of purpose. Hearts that are not tangled in contradiction, but centered. Hearts that want what God wants, more than what they want for themselves. To be pure in heart is not to be flawless. It is to be honest, to have unmixed motives, to not live a double life, saying one thing and meaning another. It's the opposite of hypocrisy. The pure in heart don't perform for approval. They don't pray long-winded prayers to impress crowds. They pray simply, authentically, directly. And in that simplicity, in that wholeness, they begin to see what others miss. They see God, not just in temples or thunder or sacred texts, but in ordinary moments. In a sunrise, in the eyes of a child, in the silence between sentences. For those who have purified vision, God is everywhere. And he is beautiful. They speak to God like a child speaks to a parent, freely, honestly, without performance, because they trust he already knows their needs before they are ever spoken. Their words do not mask their hearts, but reflect them. Their lives align inside and out, with no split between public persona and private self. Integrity is their atmosphere, not their effort. This unity of heart is not rigid or religious. It is natural, like how a child lives in the moment with no ulterior motive. Watch a 5-year-old approach a butterfly. There is no calculation, no agenda, only awe, delight, and an unfiltered desire to get close to something beautiful. This is the kind of spiritual vision Jesus offers, direct, unhindered, and rooted in wonder. But sin muddies that clarity. It tangles up the soul in knots of anxiety, guilt, and pride. It clouds our ability to see God clearly. Guilt weighs down our judgment. Shame casts long shadows over how we see ourselves. Pride becomes a thick fog that makes the soul lose sight of its creator. These inner distortions do not just blind, they isolate. But purity, Jesus says, purges the lens. It clears the fog, removes the grime, and lets the light in. And the promise is both bold and breathtaking in its simplicity. They will see God. Not might. Not someday if they try hard enough. But will. The present tense in the original Greek implies ongoing vision, continual encounter, not just a future revelation in paradise, but a lived experience here and now. This divine seeing unfolds like morning. It begins subtly, like the first silver thread of dawn against a dark horizon. Then color seeps into everything. The sky shifts, the hills glow, the shadows dissolve. Finally, light floods the landscape, changing the very way the world looks. For those with pure hearts, this is how God begins to appear. First in glimpses, then in whispers, then in unmistakable presence. They begin to recognize his face in unlikely places. In a stranger offering help with no expectation of return, in the playful laughter of children skipping rope under olive trees, in bread passed hand to hand among friends who know grief, in the gentle voice that says, "I forgive," when justice would say, "I won't forget." With purified vision, they see divine fingerprints everywhere, etched into small things, hidden in ordinary moments. Scripture itself becomes alive in their hands. Words that once felt stiff and remote start to speak like close friends. Laws that once felt burdensome now carry the fragrance of freedom. Promises that seemed too good to be real now feel as reliable as gravity. A scribe sits in the crowd, a man who has memorized large portions of the Torah, yet often feels emotionally distant from the very God whose words he carries like sacred treasure. As he listens to Jesus, something softens. Perhaps, he wonders, it isn't knowledge that's lacking, but alignment. Perhaps it's not more precision he needs, but more purity of heart. Purity, after all, is not a moment, it's a practice. Like a garden, it must be tended daily. The heart, left unattended, collects clutter, grudges, distractions, secret ambitions, hidden resentments, each one a weed that grows until it chokes out light. Every choice either clears the lens or muddies it. Every thought feeds either clarity or confusion. The pure in heart live by a rhythm of honest confession. They are quick to bring their faults into the open. They don't nurse old injuries, defend bad decisions, or shift blame to others. Instead, they step willingly into light, trusting that forgiveness can restore what guilt has blurred. They also guard their hearts like sacred wells. They choose their company with care, surrounding themselves with those who encourage what is holy, what is hopeful. They filter what they consume, feeding their minds with things that lift rather than degrade, protect rather than pollute. They understand something most forget. Whatever fills the heart eventually overflows into life. This kind of purity is both gift and growth. It is granted freely by God to those who ask with open hands, but it also demands effort, practice, and intentionality. Like a body trained for strength, the spirit is refined through consistent, quiet work. The reward is nothing less than intimacy with God, not just knowledge about Him, but relationship, nearness, familiarity. The pure in heart begin to recognize His voice in silence. They trust His goodness when storms rise. They see Him not as an abstract deity, but as a friend who walks beside them, unseen but never absent. And in seeing God more clearly, they also begin to see themselves more truthfully. They become aware of their own deep need for grace, their helplessness to earn salvation, their utter dependence on mercy. This awareness kills pride but grows humility. It makes room for gratitude and for the tenderness that comes from knowing you are loved not because you deserve it, but because God delights in loving. That same clarity changes how they view others. They begin to see past the scars and stains of the outer life and glimpse the divine image beneath. They see not just failure but potential, not just brokenness but beauty waiting to be redeemed. This vision moves them to deeper love, freer forgiveness, and stubborn hope. They live like those who have caught a glimpse of heaven, and everything about them, how they speak, how they give, how they live, carries the faint fragrance of eternity. But this promise is not only for now. It stretches beyond time. One day, Jesus says, the partial vision we hold now will give way to full sight. What we believe by faith today we will behold with open eyes in the coming kingdom. In that moment, no veil will remain. Until then, the pure in heart walk through this world with eyes wide open, seeing hints of the divine in shadows and light, in sorrow and joy. Their lives become windows through which others can glimpse the reality of God. They reflect His glory not through perfection, but through purity of intention. And in their presence, others begin to believe that more is possible than what this world offers. Blessed are the peacemakers. War is written into the bones of human history. From the first family feud that ended in murder to the wars of nations and tribes, violence has been our cruel inheritance. It multiplies across centuries, spilling blood, fracturing families, hardening hearts. And into this long, bitter legacy, Jesus speaks something astonishing, a blessing on those who make peace. Not those who merely prefer peace, not those who quietly wish for it, but those who actively pursue it, create it, insist upon it. Blessed are the peacemakers, He says, for they will be called children of God. This crowd knows conflict intimately. The Roman occupation is a daily pressure, a military boot pressing down on Jewish life. Romans hold power. Jews resent it. Tax collectors serve both systems and satisfy neither. Religious groups argue endlessly about law and doctrine, while the people suffer, unheard. Some call for armed resistance, a new David to drive the enemy out with sword and flame. Others settle into silence, trying to survive by keeping their heads down. Jesus offers another way, neither surrender nor aggression, but reconciliation. True peace, He teaches, is not simply the absence of violence. It is shalom, a flourishing of justice, mercy, harmony, and wholeness. It is everything made right again. Peacemakers work for this kind of healing, one conversation at a time. A merchant in the crowd understands this in practice. His daily business requires him to cross boundaries. He buys from Jewish farmers and sells to Roman soldiers. He speaks multiple languages, navigates multiple cultures. He builds trust where others see enemies. He knows that peacemaking means risking misunderstanding. It means stepping between those who would rather stay enemies. It means absorbing heat from both sides while sowing seeds of trust in contested ground. Peacemakers are often misunderstood. Warriors call them weak for refusing to fight. Victims call them naive for believing in change. Authorities call them dangerous for questioning the status quo. But still they stand in the breach, believing reconciliation is not only possible, but worth everything. And the work begins with listening. Peacemakers know that healing can't begin until pain is acknowledged. They make space for stories to be heard, for wounds to be named, for dignity to be restored. They listen before they speak. And when they do speak, they choose their words carefully, truth wrapped in grace, honesty that heals rather than wounds. Sometimes, peace requires confrontation. Not every storm can be calmed without addressing its cause. Peacemakers challenge injustice, not with violence, but with moral clarity. They don't merely manage conflict. They dig down to its roots and plant something better in its place. On the hillside, a father and his grown son sit just feet apart, but feel miles away. Years of silence have hardened into bitterness. The father is proud. The son is angry. But Jesus' words stir something in both of them. A flicker of possibility that maybe the wall between them can be torn down. The promise is staggering. Peacemakers will be called children of God, not simply followers or servants, but family. They bear his likeness. They reflect his nature. Because God, at his core, is the great reconciler, the one who crosses every divide to bring us home. Peacemakers live out his mission on earth, and heaven, when it sees them, calls them sons and daughters of the Most High. Calling runs through the soul of the peacemaker like a thread woven into their spiritual DNA. It's not merely a choice or a task, it's an inheritance. Those who make peace are not just doing good. They are revealing where they come from, whose image they bear. They demonstrate their lineage, not earthly, but heavenly. They live out the character of the God who built the first bridge between heaven and earth, who invited enemies to become friends, who turned fighters into followers, warriors into worshipers. Just as children instinctively believe their parents can fix what is broken, can make what's wrong right again, so the peacemakers carry that same sacred confidence. They live with unshakable trust in their Father's ability to restore all that has been torn, to reconcile all that has been fractured, to bring healing even where hatred has festered for generations. That confidence fuels their persistence. They work with hope, not because it's easy, but because they already know how the story ends, with God's justice, not revenge, and his restoration, not destruction. And this blessing doesn't stop at the individual. It births a community. Peacemakers recognize each other, not just across town, but across languages, across borders, across the deep chasms of race, religion, and politics. They find one another in unexpected places: the courtroom, the battlefield, the marketplace, the prison cell. Like rivers feeding the same ocean, they form a network of reconciliation that flows through every crack in the human story. And though the work is long and often disheartening, they keep going. They know generational wounds do not heal in one dialogue. Centuries of injustice are not reversed by a single apology. Peacemaking is slow work, measured in inches, not miles. Progress comes like water shaping stone, gradually, invisibly at times, yet unrelenting. And so they learn patience. They learn how to sow in silence, how to wait in faith, how to celebrate the small shifts, the softened tone, the second conversation. They become experts not only in reconciliation, but in perseverance. They also understand that the first battlefield is internal. How can anyone reconcile others when their own heart is divided? How can you teach forgiveness if bitterness has made its home in you? How can peace flow outward if there is war within? A woman stands still, listening to Jesus' voice as it echoes over the hillside. She remembers her sister's words, sharp, cold, spoken years ago. She's replayed them in her mind for too long, each repetition watering the seed of resentment, each imagined rebuttal deepening the root. She's fed this grudge like a flame, shielding it, justifying it. But now something shifts. Maybe peace begins with letting go. Maybe it starts not with resolution, but release. The kingdom Jesus speaks of requires that kind of courage, the kind that makes peace within before it ever attempts peace without. And this calling doesn't end with this life. Those who make peace here are rehearsing for eternity. They are developing the character, the instincts, the muscle memory of heaven. They are learning how to love like their Father loves, with consistency and mercy, how to forgive like He forgives, with no record keeping, how to heal like He heals, not by minimizing wounds, but by entering them fully and binding them in grace. And until that eternal peace is fully revealed, they remain on this hillside, letting these words shape them. Words that could, if taken seriously, alter the whole world. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus says, not because their work is easy, but because their work echoes the very heart of God. Then His voice shifts, and the beatitude that follows lands like a stone in the stomach. Blessed are those who are persecuted. Fire tests gold. Pressure reveals the diamond hidden in stone. And opposition, like refining heat, often uncovers what truly lives at the core of a person, their convictions, their allegiances, their truest values. In the upside-down kingdom Jesus is unveiling, persecution is not shameful, it is sacred. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, He says, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The words hang in the air, heavy and weighty. Everyone listening knows what it means to be oppressed. They felt the suffocating presence of Roman rule, the sting of being judged by their own religious leaders, the tension of living between conscience and conformity. But Jesus is not speaking of suffering in general. He's not blessing every hardship. He is specifically honoring the suffering that comes from doing right when it would be easier to go along, from standing for truth when silence would be safer, from living according to God's standard instead of bowing to the expectations of the crowd. That distinction is everything. Not all suffering is sanctified. Some pain comes from foolishness, pride, or selfishness. That is consequence, not blessing. But when someone suffers for choosing good over evil, love over hate, grace over vengeance, when the reason for the pain is righteousness, then that suffering becomes holy ground. A young man in the crowd knows this intimately. He once refused to cheat a customer in his father's shop. The sale was large, the temptation real. His father was angry. Other shopkeepers mocked him for losing profit, called him soft, naive. He was shut out of their schemes, excluded from deals. His honesty cost him materially. But in that loss, something priceless was revealed. The kingdom of God had taken root in his life. Because persecution for righteousness is a mirror. It shows where heaven's values clash with earth's. When your obedience provokes opposition, it's a sign your life has stopped blending in. The blessed persecution comes in many forms. Sometimes it's physical, violence, exile, imprisonment. Sometimes it's social, mockery, rejection, silence where there used to be friendship. Sometimes it's economic, lost promotions, decreased income, a business quietly abandoned by loyal clients. Religious persecution often cuts the deepest because it comes clothed in piety. There are wounds only the faithful know, inflicted by those who claim to defend God but resist His Spirit. A woman sits quietly, remembering what she chose. She brought food to the lepers, even when others warned her it was unclean. She visited the woman accused of adultery when everyone else avoided her. She prayed with families whose sons had taken Roman coins. When the religious leaders saw this, they didn't praise her mercy. They shamed her. When she continued, they banned her from the synagogue. But still she served. Her persecution didn't come from evil. It came from choosing the harder good. That kind of suffering reveals loyalty. Anyone can appear righteous when it's convenient. But when righteousness costs something, when it invites hardship and you still choose it, that's when it reveals its truest worth. Jesus knows this path firsthand. His righteousness will draw fire from every direction. He will be betrayed by friends, attacked by leaders, rejected by the crowd. Yet he will not waver. He will love those who hate him. He will serve those who exploit him. He will speak truth even when it seals his fate. He will not protect himself from persecution. He will walk into it willingly, for love's sake. And the promise he offers is not delayed, it's present. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Not will be, is, already, right now. Those who are persecuted for righteousness do not wait to receive the kingdom. They carry it with them. They walk through the world as citizens of a greater realm. Their joy cannot be stolen. Their peace cannot be broken. Their hope cannot be buried. Their strength comes not from approval, but from belonging to a kingdom the world cannot touch. They also join the company of saints. Prophets were hunted for telling the truth. Priests suffered for preserving worship. Kings were attacked for upholding justice. To be persecuted for righteousness is to walk in the footsteps of those most cherished by God. And this beatitude confronts something deep in all of us: the longing to be liked, to be accepted, to be celebrated. But Jesus warns, if everyone agrees with your righteousness, it may not be righteousness at all. It might be compromise dressed in virtue. A priest in the crowd fidgets. He has spent years avoiding offense, saying only what soothes. His congregation respects him. His superiors admire him. He's found safety in diplomacy. But as he listens to Jesus, he feels a question rise that he cannot ignore. Have I bought peace at the price of truth? Have I traded my prophetic voice for popularity? And the strange mystery of persecution is this: it becomes a gift, not in the pain itself, but in what it produces. It deepens dependence on God. It purifies priorities. It strengthens the soul like resistance strengthens muscle. And in time, those who are persecuted become beacons. Their courage stirs others to stand. Their steadfastness breathes life into weary believers. Their story becomes a spark in the darkness, reminding the world that righteousness is still worth living for and worth suffering for. They become the steady voice that encourages the hesitant, the quiet light that strengthens the weary. Their joy, unshaken even in the midst of suffering, becomes a living testimony, proof that there exists a kingdom greater than this world, a reality that transcends logic and breaks through human limitations. Their lives declare that God's kingdom is not only real, but worth every earthly cost. This blessing does not trivialize pain or dismiss the sting of persecution. Jesus never asks his followers to pretend that suffering doesn't hurt. He does not tell them to feel thankful for pain itself. Instead, he acknowledges the weight of it and promises something more: that when suffering is endured for the right reasons, for righteousness' sake, it takes on eternal weight. It carries meaning. It echoes into forever. The hillside holds this paradox gently, like a whispered prayer floating through the air. Those who lose the most for the sake of what is right ultimately gain the most from the heart of God. Their present pain, though real and raw, becomes the very soil from which future glory will grow. What they lay down on earth becomes treasure in heaven. Their open-handed sacrifice mirrors their Father's generosity and participates in his victory over every injustice and every enemy. Then Jesus shifts again, lowering his voice. The sun now rises higher above the Sea of Galilee, gilding the hills in warmth. He has spoken of enemies, of forgiveness, of going further than required. Now he speaks of giving, not giving as performance, but giving as communion, giving not for display, but as quiet grace exchanged between souls. His tone becomes intimate, like one sharing a secret that only those listening closely will understand. In the world around them, giving has become spectacle. In first-century Judea, generosity is a public event. The wealthy announce their gifts with trumpet blasts at synagogue gates. Their names are etched into stone, their reputations built on coin offerings that sing as they drop into collection boxes. The poor linger in the shadows, their empty hands magnifying their silence. Even charity, which should be holy, has been turned into theater. Jesus describes how the Pharisees mastered this show. They calculated their entrances to coincide with the busiest times. They performed charity like a carefully rehearsed drama. Flowing robes, lifted hands, coins flashing in sunlight. Each movement designed to attract attention. But Jesus, seated on this grassy slope, offers another picture. He tells of a left hand that doesn't know what the right is doing, of secret rooms where only God sees, of quiet acts done far from applause. The crowd leans in, breath held. This teaching confronts everything they've been taught. In their world, honor is earned through being noticed. Status flows from visibility. To give without being seen seems almost pointless. But Jesus insists that there is a Father who watches what others miss. A Father who sees what happens in secret and blesses it. There is a depth in Jesus' voice that suggests he knows this truth, not just in theory, but through experience. He speaks like someone who has prayed alone beneath starlight, who has given without telling, who has loved when no one clapped. The fishermen among the crowd understand this at a visceral level. They know what it means to mend nets under moonlight, to toil unseen, to labor in the dark. Their livelihood depends on work that goes unnoticed until the nets are pulled in full. The mothers nod, too. They have fed hungry children in the middle of the night, hummed lullabies in silence, wiped tears with no witness. Their love, like Jesus describes, is quiet and constant. And Jesus says that heaven sees this, that heaven treasures it. He speaks of rewards not paid in silver or applause, but stored in eternity. He tells them plainly, when we give for human praise, we receive our reward in full. The praise is the payment. The transaction is complete. There is no further return. But when we give in secret, we open a heavenly account. Each act becomes a deposit that grows in value over time. Every unseen gift, every unnoticed act of compassion, gains interest in ways the world can't calculate. A widow in the crowd touches the worn pouch hidden beneath her tunic. Inside are 2 coins, her only coins. She had been saving them to buy oil. But a beggar near her home has haunted her dreams. Jesus' words feel like confirmation, like release. Perhaps giving quietly, from the heart, is not just enough, it is exactly what God desires. The lesson unfolds further. True giving flows from fullness, not from fear. When we give to impress, we give from lack, a hunger for validation, a need for recognition. But when we give in secret, we give from confidence in the source. We give from the overflow of knowing we are already loved, already seen, already secure. Slowly, the crowd begins to understand. Secrecy, in this context, is not about shame. It's about reverence. Some moments are too sacred to display. Some offerings too holy to parade before men. Jesus describes a father who sees what's hidden and rewards it openly. This is the sacred paradox. The acts we hide from human eyes are the very ones most visible to God. The kindness we think no one noticed becomes the cornerstone of our eternal legacy. In this new kingdom, being seen by God matters far more than being seen by man. This changes everything. It transforms witness. It redefines reward. It reorients the soul. Instead of craving human audiences, we long for divine attention. Instead of performing, we begin to relate. We discover that giving is not a stage, it is a conversation with God. The children in the crowd grasp this truth more easily than the adults. They know the difference between a gift given out of love and one meant to impress. They remember the best presents, not for the paper, but for the heart behind them. A simple drawing, a wildflower plucked and handed over with pride. No audience needed. The merchants, however, feel tension. Their world depends on visibility. How can they attract partners if no one sees their generosity? How can they build a name if their charity is hidden? But Jesus is not speaking to merchants as businessmen. He is speaking to them as souls. He is offering them a path not rooted in strategy, but in surrender. He's pointing to a different way, a way that trusts in God's abundance rather than human networks. His message grows sharper. Secrecy is not just wise, it is refining. It purifies the heart. When the possibility of praise is removed, the real motives surface. Do we give because we are moved with compassion or because we crave admiration? Do we help others because of love or because of what it says about us? The crowd is quiet now. Jesus' words are no longer just teachings, they're taking root. People begin to imagine what their world might look like if this kind of giving took hold. If needs were met anonymously. If burdens were lifted by invisible hands. If the fabric of their village was stitched together by threads of kindness no one could trace. Some remember food left on doorsteps. Others recall debts paid without names. Prayers answered by miracles that had no obvious origin. They begin to realize, maybe these secret givers have already been among them. Maybe God has been at work through quiet hands long before this moment. This teaching, they now see, is not just about charity. It is about the very heart of God. A father who gives in secret, air to lungs, rain to dry fields, sunlight to closed windows. The most important gifts in life arrive without fanfare, without expectation of thanks. Creation itself is an act of divine generosity, offered freely, received blindly. Jesus speaks of treasures not stored in vaults or stockpiled in barns, but placed where moth and rust cannot reach. He speaks of spiritual investment, of pouring resources into places the market cannot crash, where thieves cannot steal, where every unseen act is recorded in heaven's ledger, written in ink that never fades. And the crowd realizes this message is not just about money. It's about how we give everything: time, presence, love, attention. It is about the kind of people we become when no one is watching, and the kind of world we could create if everyone gave like that. In secret, in love, in faith, seen only by the one whose vision never fails. Love wears many faces. The parent who reads the same bedtime story every night with tired eyes practices secret charity. The neighbor who clears a snowy path before sunrise without ever mentioning it is quietly doing holy work. The friend who listens with patience, without correcting, without interrupting, without judging. That too is secret charity. As the sun climbs steadily over the Galilean hills, casting new light and rearranging the shapes of every shadow, the people seated on the slope begin to see. They realize they are not just receiving instruction. They are being invited into an entirely different way of living, one where divine approval is cherished more than public affirmation. They are being called to become invisible emissaries of heaven, secret ambassadors of grace, spreading goodness in unseen ways. Then Jesus pivots again. From giving in secret, he begins to speak of praying in secret. The crowd stills. The hush feels reverent. His tone deepens, more personal now, like someone who has lived what he's about to say. It's not theoretical. It's not theological in the academic sense. This is something born of long nights beneath stars, of hours spent speaking with God when the world was asleep. This is not a scholar explaining ideas. This is a son describing relationship. In the world they know, prayer has become performance. The Pharisees make sure to be seen at just the right street corners when the hour of prayer strikes. They raise their voices to be heard across the market, crafting elegant sentences designed to impress. Length is equated with holiness. Eloquence is mistaken for faith. In synagogues, men compete not for intimacy with God, but for admiration from others. Status is earned by those who can quote the most scriptures, string the most lofty phrases, and appear the most devout. Prayer has become less about connection and more about display. But Jesus describes something entirely different. He speaks of closets, of rooms with closed doors, of sacred spaces where no one sees and no one hears, except the one who matters most. He paints prayer not as a public spectacle, but as private intimacy, a divine conversation tucked away from noise. His words carry the scent of dawn, of olive trees rustling above a quiet hillside, of whispered prayers too personal to share aloud. The crowd leans in. Many of them have felt the hollowness of showy prayer, the emptiness of words spoken not to God, but to people. They've heard prayers that sounded more like speeches. They felt distant from the God those prayers were supposedly directed to. But what Jesus offers is something tender. He describes a father who sees what no one else sees, a father who listens when no one else is around, a father who does not need to be convinced, but simply welcomed. Suddenly, prayer is no longer about impressing. It is about revealing. No longer about striving. It is about resting. The goal shifts from religious performance to relational presence. And some in the crowd feel tears prick at their eyes. Because deep down, this is what they've always wanted. Not to impress God, but to be near Him. The fishermen understand this truth instinctively. They've prayed during storms, their words drowned by crashing waves, their hearts crying out with no one to hear but heaven. Those weren't elegant prayers. They were desperate, unfiltered, honest. The mothers know it too. They've prayed in silence while rocking infants, while grinding wheat, while wiping tears from cheeks too small to understand pain. Their prayers were soft, unspoken, woven into the rhythm of their labor. Jesus says those prayers matter. More than that, he says those prayers are the ones God sees most clearly, because secrecy purifies prayer. When we remove the possibility of human observation, we remove the temptation to perform. What's left is real. What's left is us. He uses the word closet, but not as a place of hiding. It's the word for a small storage chamber, where valuable things were kept, where things too precious for public display were protected. Prayer, Jesus is saying, belongs in that kind of space. It is not fragile, but it is sacred, and sacred things require shielding, not from God, but from performance. This revelation begins to reshape their understanding of what it means to pray. Suddenly, they don't need to have the right words. They just need to be real. They don't need to sound holy. They need to be honest. Jesus goes further. He says the Father rewards what is done in secret. The word he uses for reward is the same as a wage paid out fully, in proportion to what was done. Public prayer, he says, gets its full reward in the moment: attention, approval, reputation. But secret prayer? That opens up an entirely different account. One that compounds with interest. One that accumulates grace, wisdom, intimacy, peace. Each private conversation with God strengthens the bond. Each whispered petition becomes a stone in the foundation of trust. Each thank you said behind closed doors becomes a melody in heaven's memory. A young woman in the crowd remembers her wedding. Not the ceremony everyone saw, but the private vows whispered between her and her husband when no one else was listening. Those words meant more than all the ones spoken aloud. And now she understands. That's what prayer can be. Not a speech to an audience, but a vow between two hearts. The lesson transforms the idea of witness. Instead of craving human eyes, we begin to long for God's. Instead of showing our best selves, we bring our real ones. Instead of hiding our flaws, we place them in the open, knowing that we are already loved. The merchants in the crowd shift uneasily. Their lives are built on visibility. Reputation is currency. How can they build trust with customers if no one sees their devotion? How can they earn the respect of peers if their spiritual practices remain invisible? But Jesus is not speaking to them as merchants. He is speaking to them as souls. He is not asking them to give up success. He is inviting them to go deeper than surface. He is calling them into a communion that doesn't need applause to be real. The teaching continues. Secrecy, Jesus says, creates a space where authenticity can breathe. When we pray in public, even with good intentions, we edit. We sanitize. We choose words that sound acceptable. We leave out the things that feel messy. But when we pray in secret, we can say everything. We can confess not just the respectable sins, but the ones that humiliate us. We can admit the fears that make us feel weak. We can ask for the things we're afraid to want. We can wrestle with doubt, rage, grief, longing. And God does not flinch. He does not recoil. He listens. The crowd is quiet now. They are imagining what their own prayer lives could be if they took this to heart. They remember moments when they prayed spontaneously, without planning, without worrying about words. Shouts in crisis, sobs in the night, breathless awe at beauty. They recall prayers that didn't feel holy but felt true. And they realize those might have been the purest prayers they ever prayed. Jesus reveals the very heart of God. A Father who not only hears secret prayers but responds to them openly. Who takes what is hidden and answers it in ways the world can see. He describes a relationship where the hiding is on our part, but the revealing is His. We pray quietly. He responds boldly. And perhaps the most astonishing thing of all, Jesus says the Father knows what we need before we ask. Prayer, then, is not informing God. It is encountering Him. It is not presenting a list. It is presenting ourselves. It is not persuasion. It is participation. In this secret space, beneath this rising sun, the people begin to grasp a truth far deeper than doctrine. That God is not looking for performance. He is looking for presence. That what we hide from the world, we can pour out before Him, and He will meet us there, in closets, in silence, in honesty, in love. And He will answer, not because we said it perfectly, but because we came to Him fully. Prayer, Jesus teaches, is not about informing God as though He were unaware of our circumstances. It's not an attempt to persuade or manipulate, not a presentation of arguments in hopes of changing the divine mind. Instead, prayer is the art of alignment, of adjusting our own hearts to the rhythm of God's will. It is about opening our eyes to see from His vantage point, about surrendering our perspectives and receiving His. The crowd begins to realize that this teaching about prayer is not an isolated principle. It is not confined to one ritual or one moment. It ripples outward, encompassing the entire spiritual life. It applies to meditation, to contemplation, to worship, to the quiet study of Scripture. It touches every expression of communication with the divine. A parent who silently reflects on sacred words while washing dishes is practicing secret prayer. A farmer who pauses mid-field to thank God for the soil beneath his feet and the sun warming his back is practicing secret prayer. A child who murmurs thoughts to God as sleep drifts in is practicing secret prayer. These acts are not small. They are not background noise to the spiritual life. They are its heartbeat. As the sun reaches its peak and the shadows on the hillside grow shorter and sharper, the crowd's understanding deepens. They are not just being given new instructions. They are being ushered into a whole new way of relating to God. One that treasures hidden intimacy over public expression. One that seeks friendship with heaven rather than recognition from earth. They are being called into sacred relationship that asks for no applause, that requires no audience. Jesus is describing a kind of closeness with God that is so real, so deep, it cannot be staged. The teaching lingers in the air, fragrant like incense, filling the space between Jesus and his listeners with the scent of possibility. Prayer, they are beginning to understand, is not performance. It is presence, not an act meant to impress, but a posture meant to express. It's not about climbing some spiritual ladder to earn divine favor. It's about entering the presence of a Father who is already waiting with love. Then, Jesus pauses. The crowd senses it. He is about to give them something sacred. His voice grows gentler still, almost a whisper. He is not speaking broadly anymore. He is handing them something personal. A prayer, a pattern, a gift. It is a prayer that will one day be whispered in every language under heaven, etched into memory, spoken by saints and sinners alike. When you pray, he says, say this. The words begin not with a request, but with a relationship. Our Father in heaven. It starts not with what we want, but with who we belong to. The word Father shatters the formality many were raised with. They knew God as Creator, as King, as Judge, as the Almighty. But Father? That's revolutionary. It's intimate. It's tender. Jesus uses the Aramaic word Abba, a word small children say when they crawl into a parent's arms. It carries the scent of home, the sound of laughter around the table, the feel of strong arms that never let go. No rabbi before Jesus had dared to speak of God with such affection. And then he says not my Father, not your Father, but our Father. This prayer doesn't begin in isolation. It begins in community. It reminds the listener that no one approaches God alone. The fisherman prays it beside the tax collector. The widow recites it with the wealthy merchant. It collapses social walls and creates spiritual family. In heaven, Jesus continues, locating this Father not in the clouds but in the divine realm, the seat of infinite love and authority. This Father is not bound by time or space. He is not absent. He is not distant. He is transcendent yet near. The prayer opens with a holy tension. The one who is intimately Abba is also the one who rules from the heavens. It is reverence wrapped in relationship. Hallowed be your name. The next line moves from closeness to awe. To hallow is to set apart, to declare something sacred. God's name is not common, not to be used casually. It is holy. In Hebrew tradition, names carry essence. To speak someone's name is to summon their presence. So to hallow God's name is to honor his character, his reputation, his holiness. It is to recognize that we are addressing the very source of all that is good, all that is pure, all that is true. Before we ask God to act, we acknowledge who he is. Before we lay our burdens down, we lift his name up. The prayer reorders our hearts. Worship precedes petition. Recognition comes before request. A boy in the crowd glances up at his father and realizes how his own dad's heart softens when he hears his name spoken with love. Maybe, he thinks, God is like that too. Your kingdom come. Now, the scope expands from personal to global. This is no small prayer. It's a cry for the world to be remade, for God's rule to rise above human failure. In first-century Palestine, the word kingdom is political dynamite. These listeners live under the thumb of Roman occupation. They pay taxes to a foreign emperor. They walk streets patrolled by enemy soldiers. They long for liberation. But Jesus does not call for a rebellion of swords. He speaks of a kingdom of the heart, a reign established through love, forgiveness, mercy, and justice. A kingdom that spreads not through armies, but through changed lives. Your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. This line turns the prayer inward again. It is a prayer of surrender. Not my will, but yours. It is not resignation, it is invitation. Heaven, Jesus reminds them, is the realm where God's will is carried out perfectly, joyfully, without resistance. Earth is different, full of delay, pride, rebellion. But this prayer bridges those worlds. It invites heaven's order to descend into earth's chaos. It asks that what is true in eternity become true in daily life. It is a brave prayer, because to say it is to lay down our expectations, to let go of the need to control. A farmer listening to Jesus thinks about the seasons. He plants, he waters, but he cannot command the rain. He does his part, then he waits. He begins to understand that prayer is like farming. We plant in hope. We surrender the harvest to God. And that is the heart of the opening lines of the Lord's Prayer. Before any need is voiced, before any petition is made, Jesus teaches them to root their prayer in relationship, in worship, and in surrender. He is giving them more than words. He is giving them a new way of seeing everything, a new way of being. And as the hillside quiets once again, the crowd is beginning to grasp the weight of what has been offered. This is not just a prayer. It is a lens, a doorway, a rhythm for all of life, a sacred blueprint that begins with awe, opens with love, and leads the soul into the presence of a Father who already knows, already sees, and already welcomes us in. They begin to realize that what they've received isn't just a set of memorized words. It's a sacred framework, a spiritual architecture for building a life of communion with God. The Lord's Prayer, as it unfolds line by line, is not merely a script to recite, but a model to live by. It is not a performance piece, but a spiritual apprenticeship. Through it, Jesus is forming a new way of being, a new rhythm of conversation with heaven that touches not only the lips but the heart. The people understand they are being enrolled in a school of prayer where the curriculum teaches not only how to speak to God, but how to think like citizens of His kingdom. Some listening have prayed all their lives without ever calling God Father. Others have brought their needs before God without first honoring His holiness. Still others have asked for personal favors without ever considering the larger, divine story that God is writing in the world. But now all of that is shifting. This prayer gently rearranges their hearts, realigns their perspectives. It moves them from self to surrender, from survival to sonship. The rhythm of the phrases creates more than just structure. It creates movement. The lines unfold with the grace of a melody, not rigid, but flowing, like the rise and fall of breath, like the heartbeat of someone who has learned to trust. The prayer becomes not just text, but music, not just information, but intimate revelation. It becomes a sacred cadence that lifts them above routine, into relationship. Jesus speaks these words not as a philosopher, not even primarily as a teacher, but as someone who has lived them. He does not instruct as an outsider. His tone carries the unmistakable depth of personal experience. He has prayed this prayer before giving it. He has whispered these words under moonlight. He has wrestled through them, wept through them, rejoiced through them. This is not a performance, it's disclosure. He is handing over something deeply personal, his own vocabulary with the Father, the very dialogue that has shaped his ministry and sustained his soul. The people begin to understand they're not just being given a tool for devotion. They are being invited into Jesus' inner world, into his trust, into his access, into the intimacy he shares with the Father. This prayer is not just a teaching, it's an invitation into divine kinship. It's not simply instruction, it's initiation. And then the prayer shifts from heaven to earth, from cosmic vision to daily reality, from eternal purpose to immediate need. Jesus has begun with the holiness of God's name, the glory of his kingdom, the perfection of his will. But now he descends into the dust, into the kitchens and fields and back rooms of ordinary life. He turns the sacred lens toward hunger and wounds and fear. Give us this day our daily bread. The words are primal in their simplicity. The crowd doesn't need explanation. They live this prayer. They wake up with the question of bread on their lips. Food is not taken for granted. It is hoped for, prayed for, worked for. The word Jesus uses for daily is rare, ambiguous. Some scholars hear in it the idea of bread for tomorrow, a petition for provision ahead of need. Others read it as bread for today, sustenance just for now. The beauty lies in its openness. The prayer teaches that God's provision covers both the needs of the present and the anxieties of the future. It tells them they don't need to stockpile faith, they need to trust one day at a time. It says, "Our daily bread, not my." Even here, the language is communal. This prayer is never solitary. It draws the circle wide. When I pray for bread, I'm praying also for the hungry widow, for the sick child, for the elderly man who no longer has family. A fisherman hears this and thinks of the poor boy who watches him haul in fish with eyes full of longing. A merchant hears it and remembers the beggar who waits outside his stall. A mother touches her child's shoulder and understands the kind of trust Jesus is inviting her into, a trust that believes provision will come, not through control, but through the Father's hand. This line acknowledges dependence, not as weakness, but as worship. Every loaf of bread becomes a reminder we are not self-sustained. We cannot make rain fall. We cannot make wheat grow. We cannot fill our own lungs with air. Every bite is a miracle. Every meal, a sacred gift. And forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. The prayer turns inward now toward conscience, toward soul. Debts in this context are more than financial. They are moral, spiritual. We owe God perfect faithfulness, perfect love, perfect obedience. But we have failed to pay what is due. The phrase, "as we forgive," catches like a stone in the throat. It suggests that the mercy we seek is linked to the mercy we give. Not because we earn forgiveness, but because true forgiveness cannot remain locked inside. Grace flows. If it is received, it must be released. The crowd stiffens at this part. They know about injustice. They've been taxed unfairly, insulted publicly, betrayed by neighbors, abused by rulers. They are not quick to forget or forgive. And yet, Jesus speaks this line as though it were as natural as breathing. He seems to imply that withholding forgiveness is like holding poison in your own veins. A man in the crowd closes his eyes. He remembers a loan to his brother that was never repaid. It became a wedge. Years passed. Bitterness grew. He begins to see this prayer is not just about asking God for peace. It's about making peace. It's about letting go of rights in exchange for healing. It's not about pretending the offense never happened, but about choosing not to carry it any longer. It's about cutting the cord that keeps the soul tied to resentment. Jesus' phrasing is radical. He doesn't say, "help us someday to forgive." He says, "as we forgive." Present tense. Active. Already underway. It presumes that those who have truly tasted mercy are already living lives shaped by mercy. This is not a suggestion. It is a new way of being human. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. The final petition names our fragility. It recognizes that even with provision and forgiveness, we remain vulnerable. We are not as strong as we think. We are prone to wander, susceptible to distraction, susceptible to despair. The word temptation can mean trial or testing. Jesus is not suggesting that God leads us into sin. Rather, the prayer is an honest request. Don't let us be led where we cannot stand. Keep us from places that might overwhelm our ability to remain faithful. Deliver us, not just from generic hardship, but from evil itself, from the destructive force that opposes all that is good. Some in the crowd have no name for what they've battled, only darkness, grief, addiction, fear. The prayer gives that battle a name, evil, and it acknowledges that we need help. That willpower alone is not enough. That deliverance is divine work. The shape of the prayer now becomes clear. It begins with God's holiness, God's kingdom, God's will. It descends into human need, for food, for grace, for protection. And then, in many versions, it rises again. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. It ends where it began, with worship. It comes full circle. A young woman wipes her brow and feels the weight of her daily routine, meals, chores, children, exhaustion. But now she sees that every day, every hour, can be infused with this prayer. That waking is praise. That lunch is provision. That forgiveness is medicine. That sleep is surrender. The prayer transforms routine into liturgy. It gives sacred shape to ordinary time. And that final doxology, yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, is a benediction spoken not in desperation but in confidence. It's a reminder that all we have asked for is rooted in God's authority, God's sufficiency, God's eternal goodness. The kingdom is His. The power is His. The glory belongs to Him, and always will. We began this prayer remembering who God is. We end it the same way. And in between, we learn who we are, beloved children, sustained by grace, forgiven to forgive, guarded by love, invited into a kingdom that has no end. The requests we offer through prayer place our deepest needs within the framework of God's eternal intentions. The gathered crowd senses they have encountered something extraordinary, a prayer that masterfully intertwines human necessities with divine magnificence, earthly concerns with celestial vision. Its simplicity invites children to commit it to memory, while its depth beckons scholars to ponder its meaning across a lifetime. Jesus delivers these words with the gentle warmth of a father guiding his child's first steps in speech. His voice resonates with love, patience, and encouragement, not demanding rote recitation but extending an invitation to genuine communion. This prayer opens a pathway into the very heart of God. Its rhythm mirrors the natural cadence of breath, inhaling the essence of God's character, exhaling the weight of human longing. The words move like a gentle stream, like a breeze through open fields, like the steady pulse of a heartbeat. It transcends mere recitation, becoming a blueprint for living. The crowd begins to grasp that they have received a flawless prayer, one that encompasses every vital facet of existence: sustenance for the body, healing for the spirit, connection with the divine, and protection for each day. Every essential need finds its place within these unadorned phrases. As the prayer takes root in their hearts, the listeners realize they will never be at a loss for words when approaching God. Whether their tongues falter or flow with eloquence, whether they face moments of crisis or rejoice in blessings, whether they pray in solitude or in community, these words will always suffice. This prayer is a gift that endures, passed from children to their children, uniting communities in shared devotion, whispered by individuals in times of need. Across generations, these ancient words will remain ever fresh, offering solace, direction, and hope. As the sun climbs higher above the Sea of Galilee, Jesus shifts to another timeless practice: fasting. His voice carries the authority of one who has endured 40 days in the wilderness, learning to crave God more deeply than bread. The crowd is familiar with fasting as a spectacle. Pharisees timed their fasts to align with bustling market days, ensuring a wide audience. They smear ash on their faces, tousle their hair, and don tattered garments, their gaunt cheeks serving as emblems of piety, their frailty a showcase of spiritual vigor. In synagogues, men vie to outlast one another in hunger, whispering faintly to conserve strength while ensuring their sacrifice is noticed. The more theatrical their suffering, the greater the admiration they reap. Yet Jesus speaks of fasting as a private dialogue with God, conducted in the quiet recesses of the heart. He describes faces cleansed and hair neatly combed, appearances that betray no hint of inner discipline. The fast remains unseen by human eyes, visible only to the divine. The crowd leans in, captivated by this revolutionary teaching. They have been taught that religious acts gain worth through public acclaim. How can a hidden practice hold spiritual power? How can the invisible foster holiness? Jesus speaks of rewards for those who fast in secret, using a term that evokes wages paid in full, compensation precisely matched to effort. Public fasting yields its reward instantly: admiration, respect, a bolstered spiritual reputation, and the exchange is complete. But secret fasting opens an account that grows with divine interest. Each unseen day of hunger deepens reliance on God. Each private act of discipline fortifies spiritual resilience. Each quiet sacrifice amasses treasures in heaven, untouchable by moth or rust. A widow in the crowd recalls her own fasting, not from religious intent but from necessity, skipping meals to stretch scarce resources. She never spoke of her hunger, never voiced complaints about her empty stomach. Now she sees that her unspoken suffering might have been a form of prayer all along. This teaching unveils a profound truth about spiritual discipline. True fasting is not about showcasing devotion to others, but about forging a deeper bond with God. It is not about impressing onlookers, but about embodying authenticity, not about earning approval, but about embracing transformation. The word for fasting echoes the Hebrew practice of afflicting the soul, not merely abstaining from food, but creating space for God by setting aside earthly pleasures, learning to yearn for spiritual nourishment above physical sustenance. Fishermen in the crowd nod in recognition, recalling unintended fasts during long voyages when storms delayed meals. They discovered that hunger sharpened their focus, intensified their prayers, and heightened gratitude for simple provisions. Mothers, too, connect with this wisdom, having fasted instinctively while nursing infants or giving their share to hungry children, their sacrifices born of love rather than duty, requiring no public acknowledgement. Jesus teaches that secrecy purifies the fast. By eliminating the lure of human praise, we uncover the true motives behind our discipline. Do we fast to draw closer to God or to gain recognition from others? Do we abstain out of dependence on the divine or in pursuit of status? This teaching reframes fasting as an inward posture rather than an outward performance, shifting the focus from what we forego to what we seek from God, from measuring discipline to gauging devotion, from counting hours without food to cherishing moments with the divine. The crowd begins to envision a spiritual life shaped by such secret fasting. Discipline would grow more authentic, sacrifice more meaningful, hunger a guide rather than a foe. Some recall Daniel, who fasted privately in the Babylonian court, his devotion hidden from colleagues yet yielding wisdom that surpassed all others. Others think of Hannah, fasting and praying silently in the temple, her lips moving without sound. Though mistaken for a drunkard, her quiet sorrow reached God, who answered with the gift of Samuel. This teaching reveals God's character. The Father openly rewards what is done in secret. The relationship is beautifully asymmetrical. We conceal our fasting, but God's blessings shine for all to see. Jesus speaks of anointing heads and washing faces during fasts, a paradox of appearing vibrant while embracing physical weakness, trusting in God's economy over human reasoning. A young man reflects on his struggle with appetite, how food sometimes overshadows his devotion to God. He sees fasting as a way to recalibrate his priorities, to rediscover what truly nourishes the soul. Secrecy, the teaching suggests, fosters transformation. Public fasting risks becoming a performance, where we monitor our appearance and compare our endurance. But in secret, we can be fully honest, admitting weakness, confessing hunger, acknowledging dependence. The fast strips away pretense, revealing our true selves to God. The crowd sits in reflective silence, absorbing the insight that fasting is less about food and more about focus, less about hunger and more about hope, less about sacrifice and more about surrender. Fasting becomes a bodily prayer, a way to affirm that God is more essential than sustenance, that divine strength sustains us in weakness. Merchants in the crowd grapple with this teaching. Their trade demands shared meals to forge business ties. How can they fast secretly without disrupting their obligations? Yet Jesus addresses them not as merchants but as souls, describing a fasting that transcends social expectations, rooted in love rather than obligation. Hunger, he teaches, is not merely physical but spiritual, not a deprivation but a preparation, not a weakness but a source of strength. This perspective extends beyond fasting to all spiritual disciplines: study, service, solitude, simplicity. The farmer toiling without fanfare, the mother sacrificing quietly, the friend giving without tallying, these, too, are forms of secret fasting. As the afternoon sun dips toward the western hills, the crowd senses an invitation to a new way of engaging their desires, to become secret disciples whose disciplines seek no public validation, finding reward in communion with the Father who sees all. Fasting, they realize, is not about punishment but purification, not about proving worth but preparing hearts, not about earning God's love but experiencing God's sufficiency. The breeze carries the fragrance of wildflowers as Jesus turns to a topic that grips human hearts: treasure, wealth, and where we anchor our deepest investments. The crowd thinks of treasure in concrete terms: coins stashed in clay jars, buried beneath floors for safety. They know the fear of guarding their meager possessions from thieves who breach mud walls, from rust that eats metal, from moths that ruin precious cloth. In their world, wealth equals security, accumulation promises safety. The wealthy build fortified homes, hire guards, diversify their stores, yet even they live in dread of loss. Jesus introduces a different arithmetic, an economy governed by heaven's principles rather than earth's logic. He speaks of treasures immune to theft, investments that never depreciate, riches that multiply when shared. Do not store up treasures on earth, he declares, challenging their assumptions about security and success. This teaching disrupts their beliefs about planning for the future, stewarding resources, and providing for loved ones. Merchants shift uneasily, their livelihoods tied to amassing goods and reinvesting profits. How can they care for their families or grow their trade without saving? Yet Jesus is not condemning foresight or responsibility, but probing a deeper question. Where do we place our ultimate trust, security, and identity? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This truth reveals that treasure is not merely material but a reflection of the heart. Our investments mirror our values. Our spending betrays our priorities. Our financial choices unveil our faith. A farmer reflects on his fields, years spent expanding his land to secure a legacy for his children. He wonders if his land possesses him more than he possesses it, his thoughts consumed by yields and prices. Jesus' words suggest that earthly treasures are fleeting, moths destroy, thieves steal, markets falter, disasters strike. Nothing material endures forever. He speaks of heavenly treasures with the certainty of one who knows both realms, contrasting the temporary with the eternal, the corruptible with the incorruptible. Some in the crowd puzzle over this. How can they invest in the unseen, store wealth in a realm they cannot visit, trust in assets they cannot verify? Others begin to understand, recalling acts of kindness that yielded lasting joy, generosity that forged enduring bonds, love that grew through giving. A mother thinks of her children, how her time and care yield returns beyond monetary measure, stories shared, lessons taught, love given. These are treasures that outlast any inheritance. Jesus likens eyes to lamps illuminating the body. If our eyes are clear, fixed on eternal values, our lives glow with light. But if they are clouded, obsessed with material gain, darkness pervades our being. This metaphor shows how perspective shapes reality. Viewing life through the lens of heavenly values illuminates every possibility, while fixation on wealth casts a shadow over all. When we view life through the lens of accumulating earthly possessions, shadows cloud our perception. The crowd senses the truth of this in their own lives. They have seen wealth breed suspicion and fear in some, while generosity brings radiance and freedom to others. Material abundance does not ensure joy, yet spiritual richness often flourishes alongside simplicity. You cannot serve both God and money, Jesus declares, his words pressing the listeners to confront a choice many would rather sidestep. He frames God and money as rival masters, each demanding unwavering loyalty. The term he uses for serve evokes slavery, complete devotion, total allegiance. This teaching does not vilify money itself, but cautions against allowing it to rule. Money serves well as a tool, but becomes a tyrant when it reigns. To serve money is to be bound by its endless demands. To let money serve us is to wield it for divine purposes. A tax collector among the listeners feels the weight of these words. His work revolves around handling coins, tallying profits, and chasing financial gain. He begins to question whether his profession aligns with the values of a heavenly kingdom. Yet Jesus is not summoning all to poverty, but urging all to prioritize rightly. Some are called to earn abundantly and give generously, others to live simply and share freely. The issue lies not in the quantity of wealth, but in the posture of the heart. This teaching reveals a universal truth. Everyone seeks treasure, whether security, significance, pleasure, or power. Jesus does not condemn the instinct to pursue treasure, but redirects it toward eternal aims. Heavenly treasures include acts of mercy that ripple through eternity, kind words that lift weary spirits and create lasting value, cups of water offered to parched souls that yield divine returns, and prayers for adversaries that amass worth beyond measure. The crowd realizes they have been making such investments unknowingly. Every act of love, every gesture of forgiveness, every moment of worship has been building riches in realms unseen. A widow reflects on her modest offerings, her few coins paling beside the gifts of the wealthy. She begins to see that in heaven's economy, the heart behind the gift outweighs its size. Her small offerings, given in love, may hold greater value than lavish donations from surplus. This teaching redefines wealth and poverty. Some who seem prosperous by earthly standards are destitute in divine ledgers, while others, poor by human measure, possess unimaginable riches in God's accounts. Jesus speaks with the care of a trusted advisor, guiding his listeners toward lasting security. He does not seek to strip them of blessings, but to steer them toward greater ones, not advocating earthly lack but heavenly abundance. The crowd envisions a community transformed by these principles. Resources would flow freely, needs would be met swiftly, and relationships would take precedence over possessions. The entire social fabric would shift under the weight of reordered priorities. As the sun traces its westward path, casting longer shadows across the hillside, the listeners are challenged to examine their treasure maps, to audit their spiritual investments, to weigh where they place their deepest trust. Some have spent lifetimes hoarding what will not endure beyond death, while others have built legacies that will shine forever. The teaching calls for intentional choices about where to invest the heart. Treasure, they begin to understand, is not for hoarding but for wise investment. The question is not whether to seek treasure but where to seek it, not whether to invest but in what. As evening draws near, the shadows lengthen on the hillside. Jesus' voice grows softer, more tender, as he addresses a struggle that gnaws at human peace, worry, the anxiety that steals sleep and saps joy. The crowd knows worry well. They live with daily uncertainties, tomorrow's bread, next season's harvest, their children's futures. Roman taxes loom, droughts threaten crops, illness could strike without warning. Their lives teeter on the brink of calamity. Do not worry about your life, Jesus says, his words drifting like a soothing breeze. To people with every reason to fret, The statement feels almost impossible. How can they not be anxious when so much lies beyond their control? Yet Jesus speaks not as one ignorant of hardship. His voice carries the weight of wilderness hunger, the pressure of crowds seeking miracles, the experience of utter reliance on divine care. He points to the birds soaring overhead, their songs echoing across the lake. "Look at the birds of the air," he says. "They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not far more valuable than they?" The crowd lifts their eyes, watching ravens glide on warm currents, sparrows flit among bushes, doves coo from rocky crevices. These creatures do not fret about tomorrow's food, yet they are fed. They do not hoard for winter, yet they endure. A farmer reflects on his own ties to birds, competitors for his grain, yet allies against crop-destroying insects. He has seen them thrive through harsh seasons, always finding sustenance. Jesus underscores human worth. If God provides for fleeting creatures, how much more will he care for those made in his image, destined for eternal communion with their Creator? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? The question lays bare worry's futility. Anxiety changes nothing but the one who harbors it. It cannot alter outcomes, secure futures, or solve problems. It is effort without fruit, energy without progress. The crowd recalls sleepless nights spent rehearsing troubles that never came, days lost to imagined disasters, crises that existed only in their minds. A mother thinks of her children, how worry for their safety consumes her, yet does nothing to shield them. Her fear of future loss only dims the joy of present moments. And why do you worry about clothes? Jesus continues, turning to the wildflowers blanketing the hillside. See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. The crowd gazes at the vibrant display: scarlet poppies, purple anemones, white daisies scattered like stars. Each flower boasts intricate beauty, perfect form, and vivid color. Stories of Solomon's wealth, his golden throne, and ornate robes are legendary, yet these simple blooms surpass his grandeur with their effortless grace. Jesus speaks of God clothing the grass, here today and gone tomorrow. If divine care adorns fleeting plants, how much more will it provide for eternal souls? This teaching upends their view of God's attention, revealing a Father who cares for small details: bird food, flower garments, daily bread, and simple shelter. So do not worry, saying, "What shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear?" For your heavenly Father knows your needs. Jesus acknowledges these as legitimate concerns, the driving force behind much of human toil. Yet he challenges the anxious obsession with these necessities, suggesting it betrays a lack of trust. To fret over provision is to act as if there is no Father in heaven. To lose sleep over security is to doubt divine care. To panic about the future is to question God's boundless love. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. This redirects focus from lesser concerns to ultimate purpose. Instead of chasing security and hoping for God's help, we are called to pursue God's kingdom and trust him for security. To seek is to pursue actively, with intention and focus, living by divine values and aligning with divine standards. A merchant wrestles with this. His trade demands meticulous planning, budgeting, and preparation for market shifts. How can he prioritize God's kingdom while meeting practical demands? Jesus does not call for carelessness but for confident trust. We can plan wisely yet rely ultimately on God, work diligently yet rest spiritually, prepare thoroughly yet refuse worry. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. This anchors the listener in the present. Today's challenges suffice without borrowing tomorrow's fears. Worry compounds suffering, stealing today's grace to fret over imagined futures. The crowd sees worry as a form of unbelief, acting as if God is unaware, unable, or unwilling to meet their needs, contradicting their faith in divine love. A young woman, anxious about her upcoming marriage, realizes her fears rob her of today's joy. The teaching does not promise a life without hardship but assures provision amid it. God may not prevent every trial, but he will supply every need. As the sun dips lower, painting the sky in gold and rose, the crowd grasps a radical alternative to anxiety. Trust in a Father who feeds birds, clothes flowers, and loves his children beyond measure. The birds sing on, the flowers bloom in silent splendor, and the people are invited to live with similar freedom, trusting like birds, resting like flowers, depending like children on a Father whose love never falters. As evening light softens the hillside, Jesus' tone shifts to gentle correction laced with deep wisdom. He addresses a human tendency as instinctive as breathing, yet as harmful as poison, the urge to judge others. "Do not judge, or you too will be judged," he says, the words lingering like morning mist, simple yet piercing. The crowd shifts, some uneasy, for this teaching cuts close. They live in communities where order hinges on assessment, where reputation matters, where moral lines require vigilance. Fishermen below judge weather and fish patterns. Farmers gauge soil and harvest timing. Judgment seems vital for survival. But Jesus speaks of a different judgment, the harsh scrutiny of others' hearts, the swift condemnation of their choices, the arrogant assumption of seeing their souls clearly. Such judgment reveals more about the critic than the criticized, more about our hearts than their actions. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. This unveils a principle of reciprocity. The standards we set for others will be turned on us. The mercy we extend will return to us. The harshness we mete out will come back full measure. A merchant recalls judging customers by their appearance, assuming their motives by their actions. He wonders what assumptions others make about him. The crowd knows measurement: grain by the bushel, wine by the jar, cloth by the cubit. Honest measures bring fair trade. Deceitful ones lead to ruin. So it is with moral judgment. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Jesus uses humor to deliver a piercing truth, drawing a ridiculous image that causes the crowd to chuckle even as the seriousness of his message sinks in. A person with a massive wooden beam jutting out of their eye, fumbling to remove a tiny speck from someone else's. The absurdity exposes something all too human. We are often hyper-aware of others' faults, dissecting their missteps with surgical precision, while remaining disturbingly oblivious to the glaring, splintering defects in our own souls. We zoom in on their small annoyances, but refuse to confront our own significant character flaws. We become self-appointed experts on the dysfunction of others, while remaining perpetual novices in understanding our own brokenness. A woman in the crowd recalls how often she has inwardly criticized her neighbor. The way the woman keeps her house, the behavior of her children, her husband's drinking habits. But now, in the light of Jesus' words, she sees her own heart more clearly, suddenly recognizing the envy, pride, and gossip that have quietly taken root in her. The faults she once judged so harshly now appear less offensive than the quiet sins she has carefully hidden. How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when there's a plank wedged into your own? The question lands with sobering clarity, exposing the arrogance of trying to offer insight while refusing to reflect, of extending help while avoiding healing, of giving guidance while dodging introspection. Yet this teaching isn't a command to abandon discernment altogether. Parents still have to guide their children. Communities still must uphold moral health. Leaders still bear the responsibility of making difficult calls. What Jesus offers is not a rejection of discernment, but a call to purify its motivation, to distinguish between necessary guidance and self-righteous condemnation. "You hypocrite," he says with the gravity of love that wounds to heal. "First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to help your brother with his speck." The prescription begins with brutal self-honesty, a painful inward reckoning before ever attempting outward correction. It's about confronting our own failures before naming anyone else's. It's about recognizing our blindness before daring to illuminate another's path. The word hypocrite carries the weight of ancient theater. One who acts a role, hides behind a mask, performs virtue rather than embodies it. When we judge others while evading our own faults, we step onto a stage in a play called false righteousness, feigning moral clarity while harboring secret chaos. The crowd begins to see judgment through a new lens, that it often reveals projection. What we attack in others frequently reflects what we fear or resent in ourselves. We denounce traits that secretly tempt us. We criticize weaknesses we haven't healed. Judgment becomes less a window into others and more a mirror reflecting our own condition. A young man in the crowd reflects on the anger he has long harbored against his father's drinking. He has spent years scorning the man's weakness. But now he sees with painful clarity his own escapist tendencies, his own loss of control, his own unhealthy coping. Suddenly, the father's failures no longer seem so foreign. they feel uncomfortably familiar. The command to take the plank out of your own eye first demands vulnerability. It demands we stop pretending to be morally superior, demands we quit measuring ourselves against others to feel better. It requires that we examine our hearts with the same precision we apply to scrutinizing someone else's choices. Removing the plank takes time. It humbles. It stings. It invites the grace we so often withhold. It reveals how far we are from being whole, how deeply we rely on mercy. But it also changes us. It reshapes judges into companions. It reshapes critics into caretakers. And then, only then, Jesus says, you'll see clearly enough to help your brother. Self-awareness doesn't disqualify us from helping others. It qualifies us to help well. The ones who know their own pain, who have confronted their own shadows, who have received grace deeply, they're the ones best equipped to offer healing. These are the wounded healers, the recovering hypocrites, the former moralists who've learned how to love, the people who know what it's like to be lost and to be found. The crowd realizes that refusing to judge doesn't mean refusing to love. You can love someone deeply without endorsing every choice they make. You can offer support without demanding they be perfect. You can call them higher without tearing them down. A father thinks of his wayward son, of how his harsh judgments and constant criticism have only widened the gap between them. Maybe he wonders what his son needs is not another lecture, but an embrace. Perhaps mercy might speak more loudly than judgment ever could. Perhaps love could rebuild what condemnation has broken. The teaching doesn't just reshape personal relationships, it reshapes entire communities. Instead of competing in a silent contest of who's most righteous, people begin joining hands to help each other grow. Instead of standing atop spiritual pedestals, they gather at eye level, sharing the same hunger for transformation. Judgment gives way to mercy, pride gives way to empathy. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting the Sea of Galilee in fiery gold, the crowd has been invited into a new way of being, a way that begins with heart work, with looking inward before speaking outward, with removing their own barriers to clarity before helping others see. Some still resist the teaching. They argue that moral standards must be upheld, that accountability is necessary. But Jesus isn't silencing correction, he's refining its source. He is shifting the goal from ego to love, from superiority to sincerity. When correction flows from compassion instead of pride, it becomes balm, not blade. Others feel their hearts sigh with relief. They see now how judgment has crippled their relationships, how constant criticism has led to distance, how moral superiority has isolated them from the very ones they long to help. The words feel like release, like rest from the exhausting work of playing God in others' lives. Judgment, they now understand, belongs not to them, but to the one who sees with perfect love. Their role is something entirely different: to care, to serve, to hope, to forgive, to give away the same mercy they so desperately depend on. The light now fades across the hillside. Jesus' voice softens, yet carries renewed encouragement as he speaks again of prayer, not as pleading in fear, but as confident, hope-filled pursuit. Ask, he says gently, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. The words fall like waves, simple, rhythmic, full of invitation. Each verb, ask, seek, knock, builds in intensity, suggesting levels of spiritual engagement. The crowd knows how to ask. Children ask for bread. Beggars ask for coins. Disciples ask for teaching. Asking reveals trust in the giver's goodness, even if the request is small. But Jesus points beyond casual asking. Seeking means pursuit. It implies urgency. We seek things we've lost, things essential, things that matter so much we'll search day and night. The shepherd leaves 99 sheep to seek one. The woman lights a lamp to find her lost coin. The father watches the horizon, longing for his son to come home. Seeking is prayer fueled by deep need. A fisherman remembers how after a storm, he searched the shoreline for his scattered nets. He couldn't rest until he found them. His survival depended on it. That's what spiritual seeking looks like. Undistracted focus, refusing to give up. Then there's knocking, the boldest gesture yet. You knock when you need access, when you need shelter, when you're desperate, when you're out of options. You knock when delay means danger. Travelers knock urgently to escape the night. Friends knock when they need help now. Jesus offers this progression to stir deeper longing, to teach that the Father welcomes persistence, not as annoyance but as intimacy. Asking begins the conversation. Seeking deepens it. Knocking insists on it. And in every case, the door opens not by force, but by grace. A promise rings out, vast and unshakable. All who ask receive, all who seek find, and all who knock find the door flung wide. Its scope is boundless, its assurance a beacon, not for a select few, but for everyone, not now and then, but always, not perhaps, but without fail. Yet the crowd stirs, hearts wrestling with doubt. They have whispered prayers that faded unanswered, chased dreams that slipped beyond reach, pounded on doors that stood firm. How can Jesus proclaim such certainty when their lives tell a more tangled tale? A widow's thoughts drift to her fervent pleas for her husband's life, cries that seemed to dissolve as she held him in his final moments. Did her prayers reach heaven? Was her faith too fragile, her asking too faint? Jesus leans into their questions with a story that tugs at every parent's heart. Which of you, if your child begs for bread, would offer a stone? Or if they crave a fish, would hand them a snake? The words pierce, revealing a deep truth about how the divine meets human need. Even imperfect parents, bound by flaws and limits, burn to give their children good gifts. Mothers and fathers toil through long days, sacrificing their own comfort to provide food, shelter, and security, ensuring their little ones never lack. The crowd murmurs in agreement, their minds filled with images of parents who give all so their children might thrive, offering not every whim, but every necessity, wrapped in love. If you, with all your human frailties, know how to shower your children with good gifts, how much more will your Father in heaven pour out blessings on those who ask? The logic flows like a river, carrying them from earthly love to divine perfection. To call humans evil is no cruel jab, but a gentle nod to their limits. Parents, though devoted, falter in selfishness, their resources finite, their wisdom incomplete. But the Heavenly Father knows no such bounds. His love is flawless, His generosity a boundless sea, His provision an endless well. If earthly parents can be trusted to answer their children's needs, how much greater is the trust owed to a perfect Father? A young mother, clutching her infant close, feels the weight of her fierce love for her child, yet senses God's love for her burns brighter still, surpassing even her deepest maternal care. This teaching weaves a new understanding of prayers that seem unanswered. When parents deny a child's request, it's often wisdom, not neglect, guiding their choice. A child clamoring for sweets before supper is given nourishing bread. One eager to dart into danger is held back for safety. God's refusals carry the same care, granting not always what we ask, but what we need. We plead for healing, and God offers strength to bear the pain. We seek riches, and God grants peace and simplicity. We yearn for ease, and God provides growth through struggle. The crowd begins to see that asking, seeking, and knocking are not levers to pull divine strings, but invitations to align with heaven's will. Prayer reshapes the heart more than the world, preparing the soul more than bending God's plans. A farmer recalls his prayers for rain, how water sometimes came not in storms but in quiet ways, morning mist, far-off clouds, hidden streams. God's answers, he sees, often were unexpected faces, arriving through paths unchosen. The promise, ask, and it will be given, does not vow to mirror our exact desires, but to meet them with divine love, to answer with provision, to hear every cry. To persist in asking, seeking, and knocking is to weave a tapestry of faith, not doubt, trusting in God's goodness, His timing, His answers worth the wait. Such persistence delights the divine, a song of trust rather than a clamor of complaint. Jesus speaks as one who has knelt through starlit nights, seeking strength in desolate places, wisdom for weary crowds, compassion for broken hearts. His words pulse with the rhythm of one who knows heaven's replies. The crowd feels a spark of courage to pray boldly, to ask without fear of overstepping, to seek without dread of failure, to knock with hope undimmed. Their persistence is no burden to their Father, but a joy. Some have shied from asking, deeming their needs too small for divine ears. Others have hesitated to seek guidance, assuming God demands they forge their own path. Still others have paused at heaven's door, fearing their knock interrupts greater matters. Yet Jesus unveils a God who cherishes every request, who welcomes every plea, whose door stands ever open to the seeker's hand. A merchant, weighed down by business struggles, sees his reliance on mortal cunning anew. Divine wisdom, he realizes, awaits his asking. To seek God's help is strength, not surrender. This teaching kindles hope without chaining it to rigid outcomes. We can ask with boldness, trusting God's wisdom to shape the answer, seek with fervor, yielding to His timing for the finding, knock with courage, resting in his will for the opening. As the sun kisses the horizon, painting the lake in molten gold, the crowd receives a radiant call to persistent prayer, to ask with unwavering trust, to seek with hearts alight. They are assured their Father delights in giving good gifts. Prayer, they grasp, is not a tool to bend God to their will, but a path to discover his desires, not a means to rewrite divine plans, but a way to weave themselves into divine purposes, not a tactic to sway heaven, but a dance with its eternal rhythm. The words linger, a sacred mist, filling souls with hope and possibility. They are summoned to approach God's throne with fearless hearts, to lay their needs before him with confidence, to await his response with faith. Their asking carries weight, their seeking finds its mark, their knocking parts the door. The sun rises higher over the Sea of Galilee, hours unfurling since Jesus first settled on this gentle hillside. The crowd lingers, some leaning against sun-warmed stones, children hushed in their mother's embrace. His voice, steady as dawn's first light, flows across the slope. Two images rise, clear and piercing, a gate and a foundation. The sermon draws toward its close, yet these final words open like windows to a vast horizon. Enter through the narrow gate, Jesus calls, his voice a quiet thunder. Gates are familiar to the crowd, broad ones for merchants with laden beasts, ornate arches for Roman pomp, and small, shadowed passages known only to those who seek them. Jesus speaks of two roads, two choices that carve the shape of a life. The wide gate yawns invitingly, its path smooth and flower-strewn, beckoning many with promises of ease. It offers comfort without cost, joy without labor, appealing to the heart's hunger for quick rewards and gentle trails. But Jesus, echoing the crowd's hard-earned wisdom, knows the easy road often twists toward ruin. The wide gate leads to paths that sparkle with false light, where freedom morphs into chains, where brightness casts long, deceptive shadows. The narrow gate stands apart, elusive, less trodden, demanding more of those who enter. It asks for burdens to be shed, pride left behind, the weight of grudges set down, the fear of others' judgment abandoned. This gate pairs the soul to its essence, welcoming each person alone, wholly, intimately. An ancient teaching whispers, every divine doorway fits one soul at a time, demanding personal faith, not borrowed courage or another's path. The road beyond climbs steep and rocky, winding through shadows where the future hides. It calls for trust when sight grows dim, faith when the way grows hard. Yet those who walk this path speak of joys unlooked for, strength that rises unbidden, peace that blooms where none should grow. Jesus paints another scene, two builders, two houses, two storms that test all that stands. The wise builder toils with care, digging deep while others mock the labor. Why such effort when the ground seems firm? The foundation demands unseen work, clearing loose earth, casting aside stones, reaching the unyielding bedrock. Only then does the house rise. When storms roar, and Jesus knows they will, the house on rock stands resolute. Winds scream, rains lash, floods claw at its base, but the foundation, anchored in the eternal, holds fast. The foolish builder chooses haste, raising a house on shifting sand. The work is swift, the structure striking, drawing admiration for its speed. For a season, perhaps many, it stands tall, its builder resting in pride. But storms heed no one's pride, arriving with untamed fury. The winds that merely test the rock-founded house rip at the sandy one. Rain turns soil to sludge, exposing the fleeting as frail, the clever as folly. Its fall, Jesus says, his voice stark, is great. The crowd knows storms, homes shattered, lives appended when foundations crumbled. They feel this truth etched in their bones. Yet Jesus offers more than a warning. His words this day on mercy, forgiveness, loving foes, trusting God's care, the purity of prayer, are the bedrock every soul seeks. These are not mere ideals, but the foundation to withstand any gale. To build on rock is to hear these truths and live them, to weave them into the fabric of daily choices. Knowledge alone builds no shelter. Obedience turns teaching into life. The crowd sits, heart stilled, sensing the weight of the choice before them, not just to follow Jesus from this hill, but to shape all that lies ahead. The narrow gate and the rock foundation are bound together, both calling for the harder path to reach the truer home. Jesus rises, the sermon complete. The mountain has cradled truths that will echo through time. The people gather their cloaks, lift their children, and turn toward home, but the deeper journey has only begun. Two gates stand ready, two foundations await their choice. Each soul must decide which builder they will become. As the sun nears its zenith, the Sea of Galilee glints below, and in the hush that follows, eternity holds its breath, waiting to see how hearts will answer words that can remake the world.